Welcome to your Wednesday dose of dad rock. I just noticed that we probably need a new graphic for the rolling intro there before this, because my beard is now whiter and wider than the one in that image. Welcome, everybody. It's the Hang Up right here on the line. I'm Matt Dillahunty. For those who don't know, I normally host the Sunday show on Sundays, and this network has a bunch of different shows, and they're all call in of some variety or another. This is my regular Wednesday show, which can touch on any topic. Actually, is just what's Matt hung up on today. But still, as with all the shows that I do, if you are a theist, you will always go to the head of the queue. If you are calling in with, here's the second place spot in the queue. If you're calling in with a correction, that goes straight to number 2 in the queue. I would make it number 1, but I am liable to screw up so much that we would never get to theistic callers if it weren't for the correction calls coming in. But I don't even know how much I count as an activist. That's not really so much the point, is that I try to get people information on a number of issues and put them in touch with other activists and activist organizations for things that I know and love and care about. And I'm a skeptic, I'm a humanist, I'm an atheist. There's a dozen other labels that apply, most of which I don't really care that much about. But we have been dealing with impositions and violations of church-state separation, of religious privilege, and I've been fighting against that for most of the last couple of decades. And because of that, the perception is, oh, Matt spends his time debating theists, and it's rah, rah, yeah, and I'm a WWE body slam you. And that's not even close to the majority of what I do or how it's done, but I understand. I'm not clueless. I was in an argument on Facebook today, and somebody's like, or yesterday, over the last 24 hours, and they were like, oh, Matt just called me out and said bad things about me. And somebody else is like, well, I stopped watching him a long time ago because he's just so aggressive. I get it. I'm not everybody's cup of tea. But I get shit done. And it's been pretty effective over the last, I don't know, 18, 19 years, however long, it doesn't matter. The problem here is that lately I've spent almost as much of my time, I almost said spare time, but I really don't have much in the way of spare time. Those who follow me on Twitch streaming have seen I recently played Talos Principle 2, but apart from that, I have not been on. I have not been streaming. By the way, I'm not going to be on the Sunday show this weekend because we will be taking care of our zoo here. We have oodles and gobs of reptiles and rodents as part of our Epic Loot Exotic hobby / business. And there is a massive freeze coming to Texas and Central Texas starting late Sunday night. And so where normally Monday nights would be the night or Monday during the day would be the day that we use to clean up all the rodent tubs and, get everything reorganized and start up fresh, there is a chance that we could be without power and that the temperature could be around 19 or 20 degrees outside. And so we're going to be spending basically Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday doing prep work here, just so that we don't have any real risk of losing animals or anything else, even if there's power outage. I've got a backup way of getting us power. Although I will say my house didn't lose power in the freeze and the blizzard of 2021. I don't know why I went on the sidetrack about the Epic Loot Exotic stuff, apart from to let you know that I'm not going to be here on Sunday and that we're going to be busy on stuff. And so when I talk about what do I do in my spare time, I spend a lot of time arguing with people, trying to educate and inform people on different things. And a good chunk of my time is spent correcting bad information, misinformation, confusion, and a metric fuck ton of really bad memes that are being shared by people who are ostensibly on my side, by atheists, by humanists. The most recent one that kept me kind of busy in between getting work done with reptiles and other projects, because I'm still doing debate reviews, was a meme that said, evangelical Christianity is just radical Islam with pork and beer. And I've seen it 3 or 4 times, and I've commented on multiple people's walls because my comment's the same, and that is, that's not even close to true. Now, if you were to stack up religious ideologies as to which ones are the greatest danger to individual freedom, liberty, and things like that right now, it would depend on where in the world you are. Because evangelical Christianity, by the way, not even in the ballpark of radical Islam. It's not. How do you go from the standard evangelical Christianity and compare it to radical Islam? At best, you should take radical elements of Christianity, where you're talking about like the KKK or Christian dominionism, things like that. When you just say evangelical Christianity, that covers a wide range of territory. And the truth is, as someone whose job it has been to engage in debates with both of those groups, both evangelical Christians and radical Islamic Muslims, they're not in the same ballpark. The risk is not the same. Now, in the U.S., evangelical Christianity is a greater risk than Islam, and that's just because the Christians are never going to let radical Islam get a foothold in the United States. They're too busy fighting with everybody else and doing everything they can in the flailing last attempts to salvage their version of Christianity, to instantiate some kind of law that imposes it in some way or another onto other people. But I've never sat next to an evangelical Christian in a debate and had them explain how, if they were in charge and if their preferred legal system were in charge, I would be killed for mocking Jesus. And yet Muslims have done that. I should be killed for mocking the prophet, which is one of the reasons why I am easy and quick to say absolutely terrible things about Islam. I had zero interest in ever drawing a picture of Muhammad until somebody said I couldn't, and then I did. You don't get to, your religion can prohibit you from doing things. Your religion doesn't get to prohibit other people from doing things. There was zero reason for me to ever draw a picture of Muhammad until somebody said, you're not allowed to do that. The fuck, I'm not. But when you look at and compare what these two groups, just regular evangelical Christianity versus radical Islam, it's not the same. And it's a really bad idea, in my opinion, to be sharing memes that make them equal. By all means, call them both out for what they do. Object to them on good grounds. Point out what the actual risk, and point out that just normal evangelical Christianity, while it is not even in the ballpark of what you might see with Sharia law implemented in different areas, is still a bigger risk and a bigger threat to Americans, to people in the West, to, across the board. That's all fair to point out. But trying to pretend that they're the same, except evangelical Christianity is just radical Islam with pork and beer. So first of all, okay, sure, Christians can eat pork, but I was a Southern Baptist and beer was not allowed. And there's the most oppressive versions of evangelical Christianity, they're not going to allow beer. So your meme's already broken from the get-go with you trying to stop creating the bumper sticker McNuggets of counter apologetics, because you're making my job harder. You're making it harder for everyone. I had somebody else posted something where it was like, oh, just because you've been a Christian for 20 years doesn't mean it's not a pagan religion. It was created by Constantine in the 3rd, 4th century, depending on which dates they put on it. No, that's not it. There was a version of Christianity that predated. Oh, well, I didn't mean he created it. I meant he popularized it. Please stop making atheists look stupid. I get it. You'll want to be involved. You see people running around mocking religions and you want to jump in and do it too. You can do that. All you got to do is just the slightest little bit of homework and thinking, and make sure that the memes that you're sharing are at least correct or correct-ish. But if you have to say, well, I think that meme was probably true in the pre-Enlightenment era. No, it literally had somebody tell me this about the evangelical Christian meme. No, it couldn't be, because there was no modern evangelical movement pre-Enlightenment. That's post-Enlightenment. This is when things changed and this came around. But it's like, oh, but the Catholic Church did this. Yes. And now the meme says evangelical Christianity, and now you're talking about Catholicism. There are few things that will show a committed, sincere believer, whether they are Protestant or Catholic, although Catholics will probably pick up on it a little quicker than Protestants, than trying to saddle them with the doctrine of the opposition, because the Catholic Protestant will view themselves as opposition. So if you want to say, well, you believe that the Eucharist literally turns into the body of Christ, and you say that to a Protestant, they know you don't know what the hell you're talking about. That's a Catholic doctrine. And so if you can't be bothered to sort out even, I get it. There's many different denominations, and they all agree on some things and disagree on countless other things. And it's a lot of work. And if you don't want to do that work, don't. Just go on about your life, but stop putting up hurdles in the way of the people who are actually trying to reach these people. There was another meme that Seth shared, which prompted an argument. Maybe we'll get, I told somebody they could call in because they accused me of using a straw man. So if they want to call in and address that, then I'll do it. But it was, a Jew, a Muslim, a Christian, and an atheist walk into a bar. No, this isn't a joke. They talked and laughed and had coffee and left as friends. And I jokingly replied, no, thanks. Coffee's vile. And somebody was like, I think you object to the meme on other grounds too. And I'm like, no, I actually don't. There are Jews and at least one Muslim and Christians that I would rather have as friends and engage with than quite a few atheists who I've worked with. There's a reason why you don't see some faces on this show in particular, because there are some really absolutely awful people in all of these communities. The difference is when you look at Christianity or Hinduism, Judaism, Islam, is the package of beliefs that are kind of normative across a wide range of people who identify with those labels. Then there are individual pockets of denominations or sects, things like that. And they're not all the same. And there's someone who's going to be an exception to all of them. And so if you say, you're a Christian, that must mean you think this and this and this. No. You might get some of them right more often than not. If you go with something simple, like you believe that Jesus came down in human form and was sacrificed on a cross as for sins. Yeah. Okay. Congratulations. You found that difficult to find cornerstone of Christianity. But you don't get to assume that their views on indoctrinating children or hating homosexuals or being anti-LGBTQ, et cetera, is a default that you automatically get to assume for them. And what I'm saying is, yeah, the meme was about, they all went in as friends and it's about not being an asshole. And of course, because people think I'm an asshole, they're like, you must have objected that. No, me saying this isn't incredibly likely, this isn't possible with some people, doesn't mean that I'm opposed to it, because how else are you going to change minds? If I can go in to a coffee shop and have other people drink coffee while I have water or something that tastes good, and wind up having good discussions where we're at least staying on friendly terms, that's great, because that's one more opportunity for me to convince them that they are wrong about something, and another opportunity for them to convince me that I am wrong about something. It's not a simple, let's dump everything in one little box. And I find myself frequently, well, don't get me wrong, I am under attack every single day. That's not a complaint. I've talked about this before. It's not a complaint. I got 20 bucket loads of privilege that are going to run out before whether or not somebody is misgendering my partner or calling me names or suggesting something, dishonest about me has any impact on me at all. The fact that some random person out there wants to call me names, that doesn't have any impact. But what it does show is that I'm at least a target. I'm at least someone that they feel like they need to respond to or say something. There's a reason why some of them call in the show. There's a reason why some of them don't call in into the show. If you're a theist, you know, by all means, the lines are open. We'll be getting to it shortly. I say all that in probably the longest little ranty opening in ages, which was a mistake on my part, because my guest tonight is someone I don't know particularly well, and yet every time I see them, every time I interact with them, they are awesome. They are doing more. They are teaching more. They are involved in activism, and I need a fresh brain to come in here and kick me in the head and tell me how to do some things better, or that there may not be a way to do it better. And so tonight's co-host is Josie Caballero, who you've seen on the Transatlantic Call-In Show and elsewhere. She's the director of the U.S. Transgender Survey and Special Projects at the National Center for Transgender Equality, a Navy veteran like myself, although she actually finished nuclear power school and became a reactor operator on the USS Ronald Reagan, whereas I got out in the middle of power school and went out to become a bosun's mate, which I fucking loved. And when all of my nuke buddies started showing up on the USS Theodore Roosevelt, so I was on CVN 71, when my nuke buddies started showing up, they're all, yeah, I'm in a BM2. They're all first classes getting ready to be chiefs, but they're standing the most shitty, ridiculous reactor watches, and I'm in charge of 50 guys and just smoking 3 packs of cigarettes a day in the hammock in my office on the forecastle. But please welcome Josie, who I have tons of questions for, but I don't want us to skip past this issue of, do you find yourself coming up against hurdles from your own side way more frequently than you thought you did? Or is this happen less in the trans community than it does maybe in the community? And welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you. And I always love getting down to things. I'm like, all right, let's do this. I really appreciate it, and it's always nice to sit here with a vet. And just to let you know, one of the viewers is in the nuclear power program and was in the Navy as well. So we're a small community, but we're pretty close knit. We stick around. So I love that.
And actually,
So
I just
anyway,
got message from Fallon Fox yesterday. We were talking, and she was also in the Navy.
Oh,
but
really? Alan Fox?
I'm pretty sure it was the Navy, but I know she was a radar operator.
Okay.
So
Interesting. Well, so first, the one thing I wanted to kind of reflect on in the conversation that you had previously was kind of the juxtaposition on one of the statements that you said, which is a lot of, and you were talking about how atheists sometimes kind of step in it sometimes. It's like a lot of people assume that trans people aren't religious. So it's like, oh, you're trans, so therefore you have been outcast from religion, so you're obviously not religious. But there's like a small but mighty community of like religious trans folks who have community through the church because they're in a rural area, and that's who the people who still love them continually in the community, living into the sense of love thy neighbor type of kind of mantras. And and I really appreciated that like idea of like, it's not right to assume because somebody is a type of religion or a type of person, it's like the just broad brush stroke people in ways that you think that you're being affirming of like, oh, you don't abide by religion. Religion's the thing that's trying to make sure that you don't exist. Like, but not all trans people are like that. And I love, kind of painting that tapestry. But going back to the question of activism, and I love how this conversation got right into the crux of the issue of like, how do we look at activism as a whole? Because I like to look, and I'm gonna pick on the environmentalists. I'm an environmentalist and all of that type of stuff. But I'm gonna pick on the environmentalists because the environmentalists, when they do activism, they'll shut down a freeway. We've had the things where they'll like try to destroy fine art, even though that may be a false flag, or they have these very strong, outspoken like activism, or they'll go to an event where there's like the Sierra Club and all the big green organizations that are celebrating Joe Biden for doing some form of climate action, and then going in there and then protesting. And, so there's a lot of things where it's like, and then the Biden administration is like, whoa, maybe we don't want to accept awards at climate stuff. Maybe the climate people aren't on our side. So there's like, and that's politics, right? Politicians are skittish. The second they get any sense of backlash, they don't want to be back in those rooms. So if you're looking at the grass tops way of looking at things, so you're saying, okay, Sierra Club, or let's say, I'm not going to point names, but like all of the national organizations. So when you think of like Planned Parenthood, ACLU, like, the National Center for Transgender Equality, like that's when you think of like the HRC and all of these big grass tops organizations, they have been building relationships. And I use relationships as kind of like the form of currency of politics, but you build these relationships over time. And it takes a long time before you're like sitting in the room where levers of power are being shifted. You're in the room where it's happening, and you actually have a say in actually having real change and real policy legislation. But sometimes activists that are more inexperienced will sometimes take on a big problem in a very broad swath of way. So my best example is the general strike people, right? And I love the general strikers. I love the philosophy of it, right? Like if I could understand, like if every human, and we had the ability to control human mindset, and we were able to just be like, okay, everybody this day says we're not going to do something. And if that was a real thing, sure, that would be a very active form of protest. However, when you have these general strike people kind of like randomly in a 2-week period are like, hey, we're going to shut down the economy, and we're going to shut it down by not going to work this day. And it's like, no, pharmacies still run, grocery stores still need to stock food, like people still need to go to work, hospitals still happen. Like you're not thinking this through. And I think that form of activism can be very frustrating when people really want action and change, but it's hard to announce to the world, oh, by the way, there's really intelligent, amazing activists in the room where things are happening. You need to support them and make sure they have more power. But that's a really hard question, right? And it's not as exciting.
There are a number of lessons that it's incredibly difficult to both learn the value of compromise, and we have cultivated an internet culture where everybody wants everything. They want it now. They want it at double speed while it's running, and they want it summarized in 30 seconds or less. Now, you can do things that way, but what you sacrifice is clarity and accuracy in some cases. So you can come up with a 30-second TikTok video that inspires a bunch of people to get involved on a particular issue. But getting involved isn't the same thing as being informed. Finding out that there is a problem is part of it. Understanding what the actual problem is so that you can strategize what to do about it is a bigger issue. And so I've sat here or somewhere for quite a while doing whatever comes to me as my best on any given day, which isn't always the best. That's just a fact. And yet I find out about an issue. I think about it. I spend a ridiculous amount of time. Today we reorganized furniture in the living room, and well, that gave me enough time to think about things and take breaks and figure out, hey, what is it that's actually bugging me? And then, of course, I'm just like everybody else that I know, and I'm in between stuff. I'm checking social media, and it's, oh, how dare that person say that thing? And there's somebody's wrong on the internet, and it is. There are Christians who I generally like, but who I will fight with like cats and dogs on various issues. One of them, well, Mike Jones, who's inspiring philosophy. We've debated once. We've had a couple conversations. There's certainly some things that we agree on. There's a lot more that we disagree on. But lately, it's like he's trying to call Seth out for stuff, and I'm calling him out for stuff, and And what I never wanted to have happen, and luckily it really can't, is for somebody to say, "Oh, you spend all this time calling out Christians, but you don't go after Muslims, you don't go after atheists, you don't go after you got your prime target." And it's like, now I no longer have a prime target, and I am pretty quick to tell you, um, if you want to, like, I don't make outgoing calls, so if you want to know what I think, all you got to do is call and ask me, and I'm pretty good about telling people what I think. If it's a bad idea in my view, I'm gonna fucking say it. If I think it's something it's hindering the progress of the broader secular movement, I'm gonna say that too. When you're working in, by the way, how many different organizations are you working with now on activism things?
Oh my god. Like my titles? Like all of them?
Yes.
I have
Tell
so
people
many.
how much better than the rest of us you absolutely are, and
Oh
I'm
my
endorsing. No,
god.
no, because this is incredibly impressive.
Okay.
Because I don't do shit
Okay.
compared to you.
Okay, all right, fine. I'll do it. And I do it for this fan, and I've done it for this group before, so I'll do it again. So, as we stated at the beginning, I am the director of the U.S. Transgender Survey and Special Projects for the National Center for Transgender Equality Action Fund. I am also a advisory board member for Emerge USA. I'm also an advisory board member for the Suicide Prevention Resource Center for Lived Experiences. I'm also a commissioner for the state of Maryland for the LGBTQ Affairs Commission, which I am the policy committee chair of inside of that commission. That's new. I'm also the vice president of the Transgender American Veteran Association, and I feel like I'm missing one, and I feel really
Slacker.
bad about that. I know. No, I think that's all of them. I think I got that. I think I got them all.
There are a few people that I've had the pleasure to know and work with, because it's one of the reasons why I don't know. Um, I am an activist on certain issues at certain times, but activism is an aspect of what I do. It might be better to say that, I'm a talking head. It'd be nice if somebody looked at me as a teacher, but not in like any kind of official way. Um, but it's like, Phil Session, who uh, worked with me at the AC on a number of different shows, was the vice president of the organization for the longest time. Genuinely one of the best people I know, and volunteers and does all kinds of stuff, ramp building projects. And he's, getting bus passes to help the homeless get around in cities, and, Austin. And I would expect some in San Antonio as well, has a massive homeless population, because generally speaking, the weather here is nicer than it's going to be in Oklahoma, or, any place. If you're stuck living out on the streets, being stuck living on the streets in a warmer climate is going to be better for you. You're less likely to freeze. And so Phil is amazing. And I just love running into people who have such a passion for trying to make the world a better place. But I'm a little frustrated, because I
Ah,
see all these people who they want everything, they want it now. I'm with you. I wish we'd have fixed some of this stuff a long time ago, but we were actually, I felt like there was progress. We got marriage equality. We were, Roe was still law. We had all this happening, and I don't want to just, somebody, don't turn, the people who are watching this, don't turn off just because I said this. But around the time that Trump got elected, and this is not all because of Trump, I think Trump is a symptom of some of the other problems that we're having. It started to feel like everything was going to hell in a handbag. And one of the things that was really weird is how everybody, this is all hyperbole, so enjoy it with a grain of salt. Everybody on the planet had no understanding of, and no talking points, and no real thought or fear about trans issues at all. And then all of a sudden, the fictional straw man in a dress claims that they love to use became the thing that derailed everything is what it seems. It's like you can't have a conversation about Roe. You can't have a conversation about climate change. You can't have a conversation about anything without somebody bringing up their fears that some, pervert is trying to do something. And I'm like, is this what's going on in your head? Are you like, if we let you be free, would you just be a terrible pervert? And I used to be like, no, 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 no. And yet I doubt that is, I doubt that my no, no, no is justified, because I'm starting to see, even from people who've been close to me, how much more willing some people are to lie and to engage in unethical behavior when they're confident that they're probably not going to have to face penalties for it. And I'm not saying that we're all base at our nature, or that I'm better than the right. It's just like, you couldn't pay me to cheat at a board game. I'm as competitive as you're going to find, and I have a massive board game collection. But if I lose, I lose. And yet, I watch people who are otherwise honest rationalizing cheating at a board game. Oh, it was just a bit of fun, or posting terrible memes because, well, I didn't create the meme; I just posted it so we could talk about it. And my heart breaks a little bit, because if you're going to be diligent on caring about the truth, watching other people who say they care about the truth be so cavalier with it, it's really frustrating.
I've been wanting to have this version of conversation with you for a while, because what I am hearing is the frustration that you have with theist as well, right? Where it's like you're like logical in every way, and then on this one thing, and it comes back to this one thing that I was thinking about, because I was born and raised in rural Texas, and in my family, when my free thought got the best of me and let me be who I wanted to be, um you know the rule became, we don't talk religion or politics, right? And I started to
Mm.
think about that a lot, right? And I've been thinking about this for a decade plus now at this point, right? Of like, why do you equate the equality of religion and politics? Does that mean you put them on the same pedestal, and does that mean you put them on the same faith-based pedestal? So
Mm.
to challenge God is to challenge their fundamental belief set. To challenge conservatism is also the same type of egregious nature. And I love my family, and they're dear to me. I went and saw them for the holidays, and but when I start to not challenge conservatism, that's not what I'm doing. I'm just trying to dial down the level of extremism, right? Because at this point, I'm not trying, because trying to turn that handle in the right direction at this point is like breaking it. You're just going to break the knob off and nothing's ever going to change again. So what I've learned is, like, you can try to like push it a little bit and try to turn the extremism dial a little bit. But even that, the challenge things like, oh, like, for example, I'll just say, like, for example, like the border, right? If you say, oh, if you don't say anything other than I want a secure border in that specific way that they say it, in the same cadence, like a prayer, right?
Right.
Like, Democrats want open borders. That's a sacrament, right? That is
Yeah.
something that is said. That is something that is worshipped, right? Build a wall, right? Just like, it's become part of their being, in a sense where rationality no longer exists. And I will tell you something. When I was younger in college, I actually watched a lot of you, Matt. Like, I used to watch it because
Oh.
I was a debate girl and all of that. So for me, I was really challenging my own religion at the time as well. I was arguing with Westboro Baptist Church people on my college campus, while I was listening to Matt in the background. How do I deal with these idiots, right? So for me, I use a lot of the epistemology type of approach to conversations around my own challenges of being raised Catholic and Pentecostal myself. Going through that relationship with religion, I have been able to kind of use a lot of the same strategies that I use with atheists when talking about religious, existence of a higher being type conversations, which are kind of like the intimate, conversations that are like meaningless with the conversations that I try to have, right? Because if I'm getting into a conversation about religion, it's probably a close and dear personal friend at this point, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I'm happy. I'm happy to have this conversation in a space where this platform is provided for me to be able to speak on it more openly in public. But I use those same religious tactics, or not religious tactics, those same epistemological tactics of trying to understand where people's values are. And when you start to asking questions about why do you believe that Democrats want open borders? And then once you're able to go down that route, you start to get through the faith-based propositions of, well, Trump said that this is what it is. Okay, great. Is there anything I can show you that may prove that it's wrong? And then you are able to see the guidepost of that conversation because you have to approach it in a messiah type of way. And I'm not trying to be rude. I'm using the analogy because I think it's apt for the platform.
Yeah.
But it's essentially that is the approach that I've been able to be highly successful in what I do and the work that I do when it comes to trying to get a non-voter to be a voter, right? Which is
Yeah.
a very difficult conversation, right?
And that may be, wow, figuring out which conversations are the most important, because I, I'll be honest. Once upon a time, I would have said, "Hey, I want everybody to vote, no matter how they vote." Now I don't. Um, I want people to vote for the right reasons. I especially want people who agree with me to vote, because I think I'm right. Who doesn't? If you don't think you're right, I don't know what you're doing. But figuring out whether it's more important, I well, I've said for ages now that education is the most important thing, and I think we're kind of failing on it in some regards. It's I saw Dan Earls, who's got a birthday coming up, so objectively, Dan, happy early birthday. But Dan was commenting on this as well, just on Twitter, and I was like, yeah, it's strange to wake up in a bizarre world where there seem to be genuinely people who think that the earth is flat, who think that climate change is not a real thing, who think vaccines don't work, who are anti-science, who think an election was stolen, when there's you know matter of fact, I referred to the Trump supporters yesterday as um, people with a vigilante mindset who have been lied to about the injustice. And we can all imagine, the father whose child is assaulted by somebody, and he goes out to get vengeance. I'm gonna beat that guy up. I'm gonna kill him. Whatever else. We understand that thought process, and there is something um, laudable in the capacity to care and to want justice. And yet there's a good reason that we don't allow or encourage, and should not allow or encourage, vigilante justice. And that's because that we need due process. We need people to be um, judged by impartial individuals, not just, oh, I think you did this, so now I'm going to shoot you, because now then the person who really did it is going to get away with it. An innocent person is now dead, and the person who took that action is going to be facing criminal uh, you know trials and things like that, and nothing has been made better by it. And so we've learned that lesson, and yet a good chunk of us still carry some aspects of that reactionary, oh my, you came after my family, I'm gonna fuck you up,
Yeah.
type of thing. I see it all the time, and it's, let's go punch Nazis, let's do this, let's punch this, punch, and
Yeah.
uh, I think that has now been leveraged to the point where it's the rough equivalent of going up to someone and saying, hey, we're not going to be able to do anything about it, but that guy over there, he sexually assaulted that guy's daughter. And that seems
Yeah.
to be all the information they want to be ready to go and take that guy out. No due process, no facts. And I'm using that as an analogy, but I think that a good number of the Trump supporters who have been misinformed and disinformed are genuinely thinking, oh, there's so much corruption, there's a massive conspiracy, an election was stolen, and we need to do what we can to save this country. It's not like the January 6th folks were like, yeah, fuck it, let's just burn it all down because we hate this place. They thought
Yeah,
that they
well,
were
this
right.
right, and not to interrupt your thought there, but it's like it's almost like the alarm bell we were ringing about critical thought and critical thinking, about how important critical thinking is and what critical thinking is about, right? To be able to think critically is to be able to like really think of something and then accept that idea or not, but at least like think of if the look into it, find the facts, find the reason. And you know, when we talk about reason and logic and all of that, and we talk about how important those tools are, this is the outcome where you have the bleed over of that type of thinking where, you know, at first it's like anti-science, no evolution, the earth is only 3,000 years old, and now we're going to start doing biblical law and, you know, murder somebody because of an accusation without any type of civil code or justice. To me, I feel like this is a logical conclusion where the most powerful thing in a person's life is religion, and where it is deemed this is how you're supposed to believe, right? Where terms like I didn't raise a liberal came out once, and I'm just like, well, you know, that wasn't really what you were supposed to do, right? So there's like this whole idea of like this is who you are at your core values, and if you chip away at that, it is so it's so angering to folks. And I have a problem because sometimes I don't even see when I'm approaching people's anger line, because all I'm
Mm.
doing is adding nuance to a conversation, and then somebody's getting very angry because they're hearing a different perspective that is a chipping away at their logical core, which gets them angry, like you're saying, right? Like, you know,
Yep.
how many times, and I mean, I'm talking to you, you know, just a tiny little poke of somebody's own logic of understanding of something that they believe such as fundamentally as their religion or any form of value, that little poke can send people into a cascade of issues and problems and anger and death threats and just complete bonkers behavior. And all you said was, well, did you know that slavery was mentioned in the Bible? And then it's like, rah! Like it's all over, right? And you know, I'm using that as a specific example, but you know what I mean here is like it's how do we have this conversation? I'm literally this year I've been thinking of that a lot, is like how do you have a conversation with somebody that you're literally afraid that if you change their mind on a different perspective of what the border looks like, they're going to punch you out? Like, what does that mean for us? That's like civil war behavior. That's like,
Yeah.
you know, that's very scary, and the implications of that. And so going back to your core question about activism and people being on their own side and seeing it in activism, I'm actually starting to see more of the unification of activist
Mm.
strategies and kind of like a rally around the flag, for example, that is happening because we're under attack so vigilantly and aggressively that we really have no choice but to look at our community leadership and move together in a community led fashion. And I'm actually starting to see a lot of that. And what I've noticed in situations where activists get a little extra zealous, I've had conversations with those activists and said, hey, let's point that awesome energy at this thing. And here's why. Do you agree? I
Yeah.
recommend this. Do you agree? Right. I'm not saying do this thing for me. I'm just saying, hey, here's a recommendation of different things that you could do that could actually support this process. Do you agree? And a lot of times in these activist spaces that kind of annoy you is that there's a deficit of leadership. There's usually not somebody in the room that you said earlier strategize. What's next? What is the bigger step? Is this action going to get the attention of the representative that we need to talk to? Right? Like that type of strategic thinking is lacking in a lot of these very young, inexperienced activist circles. And I say inexperienced because they're not wrong. I don't want to say anybody's form of activism is wrong. I'm just saying it should
Oh,
be
I will.
strategically thought through. Yeah, I
I
know.
will
I
happily
get
say
frustrated
somebody's,
too.
but it's
Yeah, yeah, I
so
hear
I
you
tell you
though. I
what,
hear it. I hear it. Yeah.
I would love to sit here for like the next 2 hours going over in more detail and talking about more on activism stuff, but we actually do have callers and this is a call-in show and I don't want to keep people waiting forever. So really quickly, just so that I don't forget later, before we're done, I want to make sure that we also touch on current hot button issues that you're trying to bring attention to and how I still want to get back to the point at some point about how trans rights became the MacGuffin to derail everything. And it's like, oh, and it's in the name of the kids and let's protect women and children and let's protect women from women. And it's just weird. But we got so many
Oh yeah.
callers here waiting. We're just going to have to do more shows, Josie. It's
Sure.
just what it is.
That's what
All right.
it's gonna have to happen.
Let's see how we do here. We've got Logan in Florida, him, who's agnostic and wants to create some kind of pseudo faith. But go ahead, Logan. You're on with Josie and Matt.
Hey, Josie. Hey, Matt. Can you guys hear me fine?
Just fine.
Yep.
Perfect. So, yeah, it's something I've been tinkering with, and I just wanted to hear your guys' opinions, because, Matt, you specifically, I respect yours.
We'll fix that.
Well, so I actually I'm a determinist, and it's something that has always really interested me with my passion throughout history, is with the rise and fall of multiple civilizations, we always see religion flourish, right? We always see not just new versions, but old versions carry out that tale and try and add it within their own ethos. So, in my mind, why don't we create a type of mysticism or religion, but higher tied to sciences? So, like, we already know things about our universe, like some of the mysticism of the start of it, the end of it, um, some of just the beauties of geometry alone, like how the ancient Greeks used to use sacred geometry, but to maximize echolocations within their amphitheaters. Something else amazing, which is natural science. Sorry, not natural science, within science. Same thing with like Gordon Gallup Jr. and his creation of the mirror self-reflection test, a way for us to find and observe consciousness within other animals. Like, do you think that would be something that would be advantageous or something that would be more seen as like a Scientology?
Well, I don't have any use for faith or pseudo faith or structured religion. Secular humanism is already carries all of the privileges and everything else from a legal standpoint that any other religion would. And I think one of the reasons I'm opposed to it is that I think it's more valuable to find out what is it that people want and need that religion fills. What are those needs that religion's satisfying? To see if we can't build a world that satisfies those without lying, without pretending we know something we don't know. And
Well, yes, sir.
oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say what I personally found growing up, because I was raised in both a Jewish and a Christian household. So I've seen both sides of a faith coin. The biggest things I have seen is always comfortability and fear and comfort of death, but like also needance of like an egotistical human focus. I think there are already things that we can see within the science field that can carry out aspects of people's fears within religion, but tie it as a better foundation for people's thoughts and reality. So like within your guys' better field of political activism, because instead of believing the world is 6,000 years old, you can better use the actual years of the earth.
I guess what I see is the redundancy of the fact that we already kind of abide by that. So you send, a rocket to the moon, like we have to use the science and the physics and everything required to be able to do that thing. So it seems like I don't know what the Church of Science would be, right? And I to going to Matt's points, like how do we determine who's the leader of this Church of Science or Church of whatever this is to essentially do that? And at that point, it's like it's becoming community led at that point, and just like create a community center, and you can have classes and stuff like that. Like, you know, I think these things already exist at libraries, like study groups, things like that, book clubs. I think there's a lot of things that people kind of gather around and like interests, but I don't think we'll ever really create a monolithic thing that the whole humanity is ever going to like use and subscribe to ever again. I think that religious, um, the amount of religious people that will be created in the future are going to be less than they are today, and today is less than they were before. So I think that people aren't chopping at the bit to find religion. I think people are trying to figure out ways to leave it in a lot of cases.
Okay. So just mainly because of the organizational structure, there'd be issue with it?
Well, I mean, again, think about, and I'm going to speak from an organizer point of view, right? So, like, let's say you're right. You've created this religion, all the doctrine, all the thing that you've done. How are you going to proselytize that? How are you going to get followers, right? And then you start falling into the pitfalls of having to try to gain membership. And how do you gain membership is by creating a network, and then how does that network get created? What kind of benefits are members getting from this, right? So it becomes kind of like a bugbear when you think about, okay, I have this idea, but you would have to have a massive idea. It's hard enough to get people to vote in a community setting versus like getting an entire global world view brought about. Like that's why a lot of religions based in with miracles and divine beings and things that were so fantastical, something so fantastic in their minds that allowed people to kind of say, oh, if a person can walk on water, that must mean there's something true there that is fantastical, right? So without that draw, I don't know why people would come. And what would you
So if
provide
I add like
community
a
benefit
better
for it?
mysticalness to it, like we have done and tested plentiful of animals. We have looked into their eyes, trying to see if they can think and fathom the world and reality around us the same as we can. Yet we thought we were alone, but we truly learned as a species we aren't. We have found the elephants, we have found the dolphins, able to comprehend reality around us the same. Something along those lines.
I don't know.
I,
I think for me, it's going to be hard to find members. But go ahead, Matt.
I'm really confused because I mean, this started with the premise that every great civilization's had religion. Okay, they also all failed, except for the ones that are, still going, but the prediction is that they're all going to fail. So I don't know why anybody would
No,
think that.
no. Oh, yes, sir. I was just simply saying that I wasn't saying they all had religions, but within every civilization, one of the biggest things to continue after is religion. So why not try and create something so whenever something does happen, here is another
The
type of
fact
foundation.
the fact that the religions have had an impact or is popular doesn't mean they're good or necessary.
Yeah, and I don't think religion is carried forward through civilization well, right? It like so yeah, let's say you do that and then 2000 years civilization collapses and you're explaining computers because we have computers right now, and then 2000 years from now this civilization sees this religion that worships a box with little keys and a window on it. People are going to be like, "Oh, that's their altar. They prayed to that," right? Like there's always going to be a loss in translation. So I refute the premise that religions last beyond civilizations, because I believe they become mythology, and mythology is not an accurate telling of the religious practice of the time.
But also a minute ago when you were responding to something Josie said, you started talking about mysticism and how maybe we should find out something about elephants and dolphins, which didn't even sound like reality to me. So it's like, it,
Oh, that's something that's
I,
proven.
I, what was the
I
point?
mean, with your eyes, like the proven natural world, right?
No. So it's a scientific test created by a scientist called Gordon Gallup Jr. in the 70s to 80s, called the mirror self-reflection test. It was used to test primates, to see if they could understand themselves independently within their environment. It's that test with the dot on their foreheads to see if they would scratch at it and understand themselves.
I know what it is.
Yeah,
I know what it
I know
is.
the study.
How is that mystical?
Yeah, that's my question.
It's to a common person who doesn't think about these things, it is something amazing that most people think of ourselves as the only conscious things on earth, when that's not even true.
How does that answer my question about how is that mystical?
Well, I guess not directly mystical. I guess I used the wrong word. Forgive me.
Okay.
So my question is the belief in the mysticism of like understanding our own sentience is a form of mysticism? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, basically. Like what
Okay, but we
truly
all
are
know
on
that.
this earth.
Yeah, but how does the understanding that we're all sentient create an organized religion? That's where everything unravels.
Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just also, I mean, I guess I'm just not following. I don't understand how or why something akin to religion would be a good idea based on whether or not animals can recognize themselves in a mirror.
That was more just like a piece that I would also use in this overlapping, like, let's say, hypothetical book or whatever. That would
Okay,
be a piece of like a mate.
let's
Yes,
say,
sir?
Logan, let's say that you come up with a hypothetical religion, and when people start exploring it, they find out that you intentionally crafted a hypothetical religion, that you decided for some reason that what we needed wasn't necessarily truth, but some sort of religious structure. And so you decided to invent one. Um, wouldn't that be like telling Dumbo that the feather isn't magic right at the outset?
Yeah, I suppose so.
And if the only way for Dumbo to learn that he doesn't need the feather is to use it to get a sort of placebo illusion going, I think you might have missed an aspect of religion. You know, people have been constructing them for ages, but very few of them were matter like outside of Scientology and probably Mormonism. I have difficulty coming up with one where somebody probably sat down and said, "You know what? I'm going to start a religion."
Around
That
the
doesn't
feather.
tend to be, yeah, that doesn't tend to be how these things happen. And so
I mean,
even if your foundational premises were right, and I don't think they are, what makes you think that you can fill this gap by intentionally creating a religion?
because I think it would be to me personally, I think it would be a better foundation of thought for most people when basing how they think.
Do
So I
you
have
think
one quick
you
question.
represent
Go ahead,
Oh,
Matt.
sorry.
Go ahead, please. No, go
Do
ahead.
you think you represent a typical sample of the population? Because if you're creating
Oh
a
God, not
religion,
at all.
then why would you fucking create a religion that appeals to you? You need a religion that appeals to the other people.
The whole world. The whole world. That's what I'm talking about. I'm gonna challenge your initial premise. Your initial premise to even creating a religion. And so let's say it miraculously happened because religions last through the test of societies. There is no proven truth to that. Like Christianity is still fairly new compared to the Roman gods and the Greek gods and the Norse gods, and there's like all those religions didn't survive. They're seen as myth. We write superhero movies about them. They're not taken
not to be
seriously.
overly pedantic, but a lot of the different faiths take aspect of those previous faiths.
Right, but it doesn't make them right. That's what I'm trying to say. It's just trying to get hearsay off of hearsay to say this is the actual hearsay. So
So why don't we make a better hearsay?
You can't. That's the point.
Because
it's still hearsay.
Is a problem. That's like saying, why don't we make a better fallacy?
Yeah.
Let's make the best fallacy. That's all I'm saying.
It's still a fallacy.
Yeah, let's do that. And let's give ourselves the nice cancer.
The best cancer.
The best cancer, exactly.
Logan, I wish you luck. Go make your religion. Let me know.
Yeah, get back to us. I want to read the Bible. Your Bible.
Thank you for this. Have a good one, and it is a pleasure, Matt.
All right. Well, let me know when you create your religion, and I will see how quickly I can knock it down. Because, that's why I exist, clearly. It's just to knock down religions. All right. We have a theist caller, and they always go to the top of the line. So DeAndre in New Orleans has a question about voting third party. So, DeAndre, you are on with Josie and Matt.
Hello, Josie. Hello, Matt. This question is pretty much like, I haven't
voted. Let's not change people's names.
As for a main party in for the past 2 elections, honestly. But it seems everyone I talk to gets mad at me, whether on conservative or liberal side, about not voting either Republican or Democrat.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So what's your question?
I'm saying, is there actually something wrong with me doing this for voting what I truly believe is the best best political choice?
Yeah, and thank you for asking this question. It's a good one, right? Because first, I want to say thank you for voting, first of all, right? Because a lot of people don't even get there. So having a vote and using that vote is very important. So thank you for that. And now you're asking a question, how do I become more of an informed voter, right? Because that's what I see. It's like you can vote for third party, but there are strategic reasons why you can do that. Now, one of the things I always say is in primaries, vote your heart, right? And in elections, you have like the primary elections and then you have the general elections. So in the primary elections, vote for the person that you think best represents your values the best you can. And if it's a third party person, vote for that person. It's completely fine. But when the general happens and you realize that that third party person that you may have voted for doesn't have a chance, then you have to take a look at what better serves your community, right? And the way that question answers itself is different for everybody. But really the question you're asking is, how do I make sure that my vote makes a difference for my community? So if your fear is that in a third party vote that you're throwing that vote away, currently at this moment, it is kind of like that for general elections. So I think that does that help you in any way?
A little bit, but it helps a little bit. It kind of goes into my mind, but this question is more like what are some of the why exactly would people consider me wrong for voting this way, essentially?
I say there could be people that could see you as wrong for voting that way. For example, if let's say you have a situation where you have a very close race between a Republican and a Democrat, but everybody knows that if we vote in the Republican, that the city's going to go in a direction that isn't a good one. But if we vote in the Democrat, then we have the possibility to maybe fix the problem that we want to fix and actually go and talk to that person. So really it comes down to who's going to listen to you the most and who's likely to win at that point, right? So for example, let's say, it's a new person, it's a Democrat that anybody knows who this person is. It's a new candidate and they're hoping the best. but they lose by a couple votes. I've seen elections lose by 1 vote. I actually vote counted for that race. It was in San Diego for a small town outside of San Diego, or a city inside of San Diego. It's a strange race, but it only went down to 1 vote. So if you think about that, do you want to be the one wake up next morning one day in a race that was very close and you realize that the person that would have been better than the person who won lost by a couple votes, right? So it's about thinking about making sure that your vote has as much weight as you want it to have. And I think people could get upset if you do vote third party when people know that that third party candidate isn't going to win.
Okay.
Does that make sense? I want to clear that up. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, but that's another thing I feel though. When people think that their vote is going to be wasted by just voting one way or another during general elections or for the presidential election, isn't that just keeping us in the same hole we always put ourselves in, like in a 2-party system the entire time?
So philosophically, right, you would hope that yes, your vote should be counted and it should be a system that the way it is. However, I have bad news. We live in a 2-party system currently right now. There's a lot of infrastructure. So when you look at other countries, right, you will look at, like, let's say the UK. The UK has a multi-party system. And there may be some people in the UK that says this needs to be a 2-party system, but it can't be because of the way their government is constructed. So when you actually look at the philosophy of how governments are constructed, and you look at the United States in particular, you realize very quickly that the United States and the way that it's governed currently leads to a 2-party system. And I do believe maybe in the next 10, maybe soon, but I think in the next 20 to 40 years, we may see a third party emerge if the Republican Party continues to become more and more irrelevant. The Democratic Party will get too large, and we may see a split down the middle where Republicans that are conservative want to join with corporate Democrats, and then basically progressive Democrats would become their own wing. And then maybe then we would see a third party system in this country, but it has to be something catastrophic in that way. For example, when we see party shifts in history, we see another party turning into another party, right? It's very rare, and there is no coordinated strategy at this moment to actually make that happen. So what I'm talking about is something that's feasible, but still has nothing to do with voting in a third party way. Matt, do you want to add anything to this?
Not so far, because I want to hear what DeAndre has to say.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I understand. Like right now, but right now, it seems more people are more and more upset on both sides of right and left,
Absolutely.
and more upset with the electoral college. So shouldn't that is that a sign that eventually it's going to change?
You would hope so, right? And we don't know which change that direction is going to go, right? And that's why these votes are becoming so important. And I think that's why people are going one side or the other, because they don't want to vote third party. Because this is a point that I've believed for quite a while, that Americans have been told that third party votes are wasted. And Americans, like Matt was talking about before, don't want to waste their vote. They want their vote to do something. They want something to happen tomorrow, right? So a lot of times people vote protest votes, where they vote for the opposite side to try to put it to the person that they're trying to represent, versus the side that would possibly win. So for me, it's like, it's one of those things, as a person, you need to be able to say, okay, if in a perfect world, let's say that the third party candidate isn't going to win. Let's say you just play that out in your mind. It's like, okay, let's say that the person I want to vote for in this general election isn't there. If I had to choose between these two people, which one would I choose? And the fact that people are upset is frustrating, but that's the reason why third parties can't win. So does that make sense? Because everybody's so upset and everybody's such on edge, nobody's even going to give oxygen to a third party. So I honestly, at this election in 2024, we are in the year 2024, we're not going to get a third party candidate that's going to be viable. So really just think about whoever the Democrat is and whoever the Republican is, it's that choice. And I hate it, right? Because I know I was there in 2016. I was a Bernie supporter. It felt awful. But at the end of the day, it's our civic duty. And that's why I congratulated you and said thank you for voting, because a lot of people don't even get there. And now it's your right as a citizen to be informed as a voter, so you can actually make a decision that's better for your community. And that is on you.
So my quick thoughts on this, because I, by all means, I it's not that Jimmy and I got into it on New Year's Eve a little bit about mandatory voting, and it's not that I'm necessarily against some version of mandatory voting. I have concerns that it would require, there's a number of problems with it, and it would require some changes, I think, to the Constitution and some case law to make it viable here. However, I'm with Josie in that during the primaries, you just vote your conscience. And that, because the purpose of the primaries is to let people know where you're at overall. Would I prefer ranked choice voting? Yeah, probably, but I have issues and concerns with ranked choice voting as well, because I think it tends towards, it maintains the status quo more likely, because you're going to merge down to middle of the road. You're not going to be too right, not too left, etc. So there are things about it that I like. But when it comes to like voting for president, I'm in Texas. Edward, stop tagging me and talking in chat. If you want to defend mysticism, call in. That's what the show's about. Otherwise, shut the fuck up. And I know I answered you, so it's partly my fault. But when you get down to, hey, it's clear that either Biden or Trump is going to be president, when there's not a hope in hell or a wild poll out there anywhere that says there's a third party option or anything else. The next step then is to say, okay, I live in Texas. Every single presidential election for the past 20 years, somebody's on TV saying, is this year that Texas is going to go blue? And the answer is no. The answer's been no every time. And I'm always a little bit optimistic. I feel like Charlie Brown with,
I'm optimistic
with Lucy
this time.
I got Lucy putting that football out there.
I'm going to go for the kick.
I'm going to run up to kick it. But at a minimum,
it could go blue this year, because remember last year Georgia went blue and nobody expected that.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's still going to be, if it goes blue, it's going to be because there were fewer third party voters than in previous years. That's one aspect of it. But to me, people are like, oh, I don't want to vote because I think both parties are terrible. First of all, there's other options. But then their answer is, I don't want to vote for the lesser of two evils. What the fuck is wrong with you? If you're not willing to vote for the lesser of two evils, that means you're okay with the worse of two evils. It's like, hey, and this is true no matter which one you think is the worst. If you think, oh, I don't want to vote for Biden just because I think he's the lesser of two evils, or I don't want to vote for Trump just because I think he's the lesser of two evils. If you're not willing to vote for the lesser evil, then you are saying you're okay with having the greater evil. And I know some people who do that. I know some people who are like, yeah, I want to shake things up. I want to vote for the worst evil, because then maybe it'll wake people up to third party options. That's not how you wake people up to third party options. That's how you get 4 more years of Trump, and from my perspective, or 4 more years of Biden from somebody else's. So when you ask about voting for third party, when you vote in primaries, and I'm absolutely with Josie here, vote your heart, because that does a number of things. Number one, it lets people know how close is Texas to going blue. How close is your area to going blue? It lets the organizers know, hey, we should maybe put some money in this district. Did you notice that there's more people in this district voting now in the primary and voting blue or red or whatever else in this area that we thought was, entrenched for the other team? It lets different political parties know where and how they should spend money, so that the candidate who is your dream candidate, or at least your most acceptable, let's be honest, there's never a fucking dream candidate. It's your most acceptable candidate. I could run and I wouldn't even be my own dream candidate. So set aside the dream thing, but at least then your preference might get some financial backing. Beto, we had a reasonable chance of getting Beto as a governor, but it really wasn't close, despite, all of the, at the end of the day, when it came in, he had the best chance of anybody since K. So, I mean, we've had Democratic governors before. We've had women governors. Hooray. So, if people are telling you you're voting wrong, okay, that needs to be a discussion about what is it that you think's wrong about my vote? Because I have gone after people who are like, I'm voting third party. And I was like, well, Trump thanks you for your support, because I know that person agrees with me more than they agree with Trump supporters. And when we know that it's down to just those two, whoever and Trump, voting third party from that standpoint of where you are actually positioned. I don't know where you are positionally, DeAndre. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but for somebody who agrees with me on 90% of stuff to say, I'm going to vote third party instead of voting for Biden, that means they're basically supporting Trump, because that vote is a wasted vote at that particular time in that way. But it doesn't mean that third party votes are always wasted. That's what Josie was talking about.
Yeah, and I want to mention as well about Beto, right? If there were more local elections that won, and I mean like local state house elections, then there would have been less shenanigans on voter suppression. And because with so much voter suppression that is happening, it makes it even harder for someone like Beto to win the governorship or a Senate seat. So that's how important. And I would even say this, and like, I would prefer you vote for everybody on the ticket, like as far as like vote in every election that is every office that you can vote for, because that is actually going to cause more good for your community than any other vote you make. So like when you're thinking as a third party voter that really has a really strong, keen sense of like, hey, I want my community to be better, then you as a local voter are going to give somebody who's maybe running for city council, where most people won't vote in that city council race, you're actually giving somebody even a bigger edge. So that's what I mean by the informed voting, because the more informed you are in voting, a better chance that you have in actually shifting the narrative. And then all those people that are talking to you, you can then have a conversation with them saying, hey, I'm voting for this person, this person, this person. Well, who are you voting for? So when they were dogging you about voting for third party, know more about who's running than them. Show them and educate them to be more informed voters, to better fight your cause. And then you're actually multiplying the vote. So I know I'm not going to turn you into an activist, but I'm just saying that when you're voting in that way, you have more say in the community process because you're playing on the team that will listen to you.
Okay. This makes a lot of sense. I'm hearing what you guys are saying. It makes a lot of sense, essentially. Right now, it's just, right, voting for my local elections, third party, it makes sense because it makes more sense versus voting in a presidential election third party, especially if I am more left-leaning. So Trump winning would probably probably the worst president we could ever have at this point.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I agree with that.
Anyway, I got to move on, DeAndre, but I appreciate it. Hopefully that was helpful.
All right, Wes, thank you.
Thanks.
That's a great call.
Just as a reminder, let me get a couple of announcements out of the way before we jump on to more calls. This is the Hang Up. On the line joining me today, Josie Caballero, who is an activist, an outspoken activist who does way more than all of the rest of us put together. I just want to say her kind of halfway blush on that. But tomorrow is a transatlantic call-in show with Katy and Dr. Ben. That'll be at 2 p.m. Central, I believe is the correct time, unless I wouldn't expect it to change, and Arden will jump in and let me know. Yes, of course it's at 2 o'clock. Why are you even questioning this?
Yes, of course it's at 2 o'clock. Why are you even questioning this?
There you go. Thanks, babe. Sunday, on the Sunday show, I will not be on. Jimmy will be on, and we're still trying to figure out who's going to fill in for me as I prepare to save my animals from a freeze. Kind of like Noah, only with colder stuff and fewer delusions. Monday, Skeptalk, John Gleason will be hosting. And next Wednesday, I will be back with another first-time guest Kane B is going to be here, who is a PhD philosopher. You can go out and find his YouTube channel. I stumbled across his content while I was researching the knowability paradox, because I'm doing for my own personal, by the way, I have my own personal YouTube channel, which I can freely advertise. I spent so many years not advertising it that I'm just going to. So go to patreon.com/atheist debates, and there you can chip in for just like $1 a month. You get advance access to all my debate reviews and things. And I'm starting a new series where I go through specifically logical paradoxes and curiosities in logic. You'll be seeing things like the Curry paradox, knowability paradox, things like that. I just did the Raven paradox and God, even though it's not a logical paradox. It's really almost wrong to call it a paradox, but it is a paradoxical view within our understanding of what should qualify as evidence, and why a red apple is evidence for the proposition that all ravens are black. It's a bit of fun, but we do all that. But yes, Kane B will be joining me next week, and we're going to dig in on a number of philosophical issues. So if you've thought that I'm a big old idiot that doesn't understand as much as I should, you're right. And one of the things that I do is I try to bring in people who know more about topics than I do for this show in particular. And so if you've got philosophical questions or curiosities, next week is a really good opportunity for you to present them to one of my several PhD philosophy friends. Well, in this case, we don't know each other at all, but I'm trying to get you experts. Here we go. We have another theistic caller. I'm a little confused on a couple of fronts here. I'm going to mute just for a second. We'll get back to you, Jimmy. I have a question before I address this, because this is somebody calling in who wants to support Logan on spirituality and mysticism. And there was somebody in chat, this may or may not be that person, who knows, who was talking about mysticism and Jordan Peterson and everything else. But I have a question for you as an activist on trans issues. One of the things that we've been doing for ages is asking people their pronouns. Generally speaking, I like doing it because it normalizes it so that the odd person out doesn't have to do it themselves and be like, oh, I'm sorry, my pronouns are this. But I just noticed that the next potential caller has listed their pronouns as king/lord. And
Okay.
I don't know what to do with that, as neither of those are pronouns in any sense. And it feels like instant mockery of the concept. And yet
It is.
Yeah.
So what I would do is just not in parentheses. Yeah, just take off that part and just be Jimmy. I'll just consider Jimmy as a non-binary person.
Sweet. Jimmy, you're live with Josie and Matt. What do you got?
Hey, what's up, Matt and Josie? I wanted to call in to. I've spoken to you before on a couple of occasions, Matt. We've talked about mystical experience. Even before you had that debate with Jordan Peterson, and I've called in to ask you to look into those studies at Johns Hopkins on psilocybin-induced mystical experience that prompted pretty much researcher all around the world now. They call it the psychedelic renaissance, this explosion in science that's studying this phenomenon in consciousness. And I don't know if you ever bothered looking into it beyond, past your debate with Peterson. Maybe you could answer that.
Yeah. But researching how mushrooms impact minds and what sort of experiences people report having is not a demonstration of anything supernatural or anything that would justifiably be called mysticism without redefining mysticism. The fact that you take drugs and it alters your brain is not remotely surprising. Not only have I taken mushrooms and LSD, but when you say, oh, have you had a mystical experience, Matt? I don't know what a mystical experience is, and not you, nor Jordan Peterson, nor the Johns Hopkins study, or anybody else has offered up an explanation for what they mean by mysticism in any way that is useful Have I been high on mushrooms? You betcha, more than once. Have I had a mystical experience? Not as far as I can tell. I had a psychological experience. I had, I felt certain ways. I saw certain things, but it's all explainable with respect to how brains work and how chemistry works. So, what is a mystical experience, and how would I know if mine count?
Okay. Well, they do define it very concretely in these studies. If you had bothered to looking into them as I asked you.
Okay,
But
goodbye.
I have a question.
Nah.
Wait, I have a question. No, wait, I have a question. I have
too
one
late.
quick question.
It's too late.
Okay.
I'm
It is
sorry.
the hang up. It's fine. No, my question was going to be about the fact that in research, right, just because a respondent is using their word mysticism for their personal experience, you have an explanation of people's vocabulary, lived experiences, backgrounds. And just because somebody may say mysticism a lot in a respondent doesn't actually mean it means mysticism. It's basically like you're putting people in the categories in how they do it. So some people may say, oh, I had a grounding experience. Oh, I had a spiritual experience. Oh, I had all these. That's just a person's placeholder word. And then the scientists study the fact that they had an experience altogether. Like, I work with researchers. I know that the researchers of that study were not intending to try to prove mysticism. So the idea that you're going to try to say the study of psilocybin now proves mysticism is not the intention of any researcher worth their salt.
Yeah, this is what we've been through several times when the smug prick who suggests that I didn't bother to
that
do it.
makes sense.
If you'd have bothered to look into it, motherfucker, I did look
course.
into it. And I actually have a greater understanding of some aspects of this than you do. I don't understand mysticism, but what I do understand is exactly what Josie raised, which is that researchers are reporting what the experiencers are using, and they're using that language. At no point has Johns Hopkins or any other study confirmed that mushrooms or any other substance produces a supernatural effect. Mysticism is the way people have their language to describe it. But if I'm going to sit here and try to have the umpteenth conversation with you about this subject, and I'm just like answering your question, yes, I've looked into it. Yes, I've taken shrooms. Yes, I've had experiences. Please tell me what mystical means to you and how I can tell the difference. If it's just a placeholder word that is poetic, metaphoric, roughly descriptive, cool, I already fucking knew that. Don't pretend like you've discovered the supernatural. And don't you dare pull this if you'd bothered to look into it. I bothered, and now you bothered, so you're gone.
I love it. It's true, though.
All right.
So frustrating.
It's very frustrating to sit here and have looked into something. I literally sat down with Jordan Peterson, who tried to fucking claim based on this same study. The study showed, by the way, that mushroom usage helped longtime smokers quit. We know it's useful for that stuff. But what Jordan Peterson said is that you're not able to quit smoking without a mystical experience, which is fucking bullshit. Because I quit smoking after being a ridiculous heavy smoker for many, many years. Haven't had a cigarette. Well, I haven't smoked regularly since 2010, October 30th, 2010. I know the date because it's also my ex-wife's birthday and it's our wedding anniversary. I did it all on Beth's birthday. That makes it easy. I never have to remember a date for any of that stuff. I have to remember new dates now, which is June 19th. But there we go. Anyway, we got 3 callers left, and then we're going to have to get on to Super Chats. And so Nadia's been waiting for quite a while. Nadia in New York, if you could turn down the thing that you're listening to. What have you got for us?
Okay, so basically, I was going to say that, there are extremely dangerous currents of Christianity, like the Christian Reconstructionism, founded by Richard Swartini, that has just a biblical law that was published by Richard Swartini's book that says basically that, apostates and LGBT people should all be stoned to death, and so on. And it's actually been very influential. Like the New Apostolic Reformation's Seven Mountains to Dominionism is a dumbing down of Rushduni's 17 Spheres and so on. So even though it might not necessarily be itself greatly popular, it has been extremely influential on other Christian movements and has all these doctrines out there to infect it and so on, or infect those other currents too. Go ahead.
I don't understand what.
Oh no.
So it seems that it seems that you think you're presenting a counterexample to something that I said. I was replying to a meme that said evangelical Christianity is just radical Islam with pork and beer. I didn't say anything about Christian Reconstructionism. I didn't say that there weren't problems within Christianity that weren't a big deal. As a matter of fact, I gave examples of some of them. I believe I even mentioned Christian Dominionism and the KKK. So how can you be calling to present a counterexample to something that I didn't say that ignores what I did say?
I guess if that's your position, then I'm not disagreeing that much then.
Okay. I'm sorry you had to wait an hour for that.
Don't worry about it. It was good to hear from you again. Have a good night.
Thanks. You too.
Hey.
If I'd have known it was going to be that quick, I'd have just I'd have taken it a little while ago, and you wouldn't have had to sit on hold for an hour. I feel bad.
That's
but all right. I'm more than a little nervous about this, but Pedro in Australia is here. Pronouns are he, him. How you doing, sir?
Hi, Matt. Hi, Jody. How are you?
Good. It's Josie, by the way. Yes, it's like Josie and the Pussycats. Josie.
Oh, hi, Josie. I'm sorry to say your name wrong.
No, it's okay. Thank you.
Cool. What do you got?
Fairly, I would say easy. Most of the conversations I have with theists and most of the conversations I've observed you having with theists ends up leaning towards personal belief and faith, right? So there is no support for gods, no evidence to corroborate the claim that gods exist, but people believe in gods based on faith. And based on faith, I would propose the idea of Tobias, the almighty God-eating penguin. And an attempt of a syllogism is, if God can exist based on faith, Tobias can exist also based on faith. And if Tobias exists, Tobias eats gods. Therefore, no more gods exist.
Okay. How is Tobias different from Eric, the God-eating magic penguin? Is it just a faith?
It's just an attempt to counterpoint theist appeal to faith.
Well, I'm just wondering where Tobias, the God-eating penguin, came from, because I was only familiar with Eric, the God-eating penguin.
I didn't know about Eric, the God-eating penguin.
So you invented a God-eating penguin without knowing that somebody had already invented a God-eating penguin?
Maybe I heard it somewhere and did not really pay attention to the name, Eric or Tobias. But yeah, the whole idea probably came from listening to one of your shows.
Yeah, it's like Allah, God, Jehovah, same type of thing, Matt.
I mean, you begin with, if God can exist based on faith, then Tobias can exist based on faith, except that nobody thinks that God exists based on faith. Their belief in God may be justified by faith or not, or unjustified by faith, but God's existence isn't predicated on faith, and neither is the penguin's. The typical version of Eric the God-eating penguin is a hidden version of what I think is essentially Curry's paradox, which is if this sentence is true, God exists. And so it's a curiosity and logic where you can essentially affirm that, and it demonstrates that God exists, which is why we have to be careful when using logic. It's also why we have to be careful when we're creating something silly like a God-eating penguin, because essentially what you're suggesting is, if you can't disprove Eric or Tobias the God-eating penguin, then your God doesn't exist. And if you can disprove Eric the God-eating penguin, then God also doesn't exist. But it's absolutely useless. I don't know what's going on there where you are, but I'm going to
Yeah,
mute
it's
you
really
because
loud background.
It
There you
sounds
go.
to
like
me
I'm in
like the caller
a,
might be driving, which we do have a rule against. So it might be worth
yeah.
checking in on that.
So I'll unmute you so we can get back to this. But a God-eating penguin, what good do you think it does to create something obviously silly, that to just say, oh, if you can make up something without good evidence, I can make up something without good evidence? Do you think that convinces anybody that the experience they've had, that or experiences that they've had that they want to attribute to their God didn't happen, or that they were just wrong? Is it like a good argument?
Oh, and well, I might be wrong on this, but in my opinion, in my point of view, pointing out that their belief in God is silly, and they still count their belief as truth, why then reject my silly belief based on truth just because my silly belief eats their silly belief?
Right. I want to jump in really quick and just talk about this. This presupposes on your behalf that somebody is going to use logic to unfoundation their entire belief set, because a lot of religion is based on the presupposition that God exists, and then they add faith to hold that up. It's not like somebody like came up to them and said, "Hey, God is real," and it's like, "Oh, we say that because of faith." That's something that you are ingrained with, something so personal in themselves that no matter no string of sentences and logic is going to change somebody's mind. Now, if you're trying to convince somebody that the lasagna is the best at that restaurant, sure, you have, I think, a little bit of a better chance of trying to use logic to get somebody to try that lasagna. But to completely abandon their entire belief set based on a God-eating penguin, that person was probably not already liking their own religion anyway, because that's just not going to be the thing that turns somebody. I think philosophically it's fun to think that it might have some type of presence, but you are assuming that the logic of the person that you're talking to is as clear as yours, which is already at the point where God doesn't exist, this is silly, which is already an offensive thing for a person who is theist. So you already shut down the conversation because you just compared their God to a God-eating penguin, which is offensive, and you're going to shut down that conversation immediately, regardless of how logical it is, like Matt said.
It could still be effective with someone. There's no problem with using an analogy to point out a fallacious line of reasoning. Yeah, I don't see any special value with Tobias the God-eating penguin that isn't, for me, better suited with. So, for example, we've made up stuff in the past. The flying spaghetti monster is probably one of the best examples, but it wasn't just hey, here's a flying spaghetti monster you can't prove. It was actually information about how people lie with statistics. And what they did was they lied with statistics. It is the flying spaghetti monster is essentially an incredibly robust reductio ad absurdum to show that if you use the reasoning that they're using, you get to this absurd thing here. And yours, or the whatever version of God-eating penguin we're talking about, can possibly do that. I just don't know that it's clear, and it feels like, to people who know about like Curry's paradox and stuff, which I'll be doing a video on soon, and maybe you can tune in next week and listen to Kane talk about it. But for people who know about that stuff, they just immediately get to dismiss it as, oh, you're just playing tricks with logic. You're trying to say, oh, you can't disprove this. And you got to remember that for a good chunk of people, including me at the time, like in the past, if I, here, let me put my Jesus hat back on.
Please,
I had experiences that I thought were actually God, were actually the Holy Spirit. I had experiences that I would have described like that. And I needed to be taught why my conclusions were wrong. And I don't know how the penguin does that. I could be wrong. I just don't know how it does it.
Yeah.
My view is that the penguin adds another layer on top of, for example, the flying spaghetti monster, that the penguin actually ate God. And
Sure, but you're getting lost in the analogy, right? Have you ever heard that phrase, like where you kind of get lost in the analogy and you kind of go too far with it? You forget why you're making the analogy in the first place, which is to try to challenge somebody's spiritual belief set. And so the analogy might be amazing and great, but you can't get lost in the weeds in the analogy, because at the end of the day, you're trying to communicate with another human being. And so if you're trying to communicate with the other human being, you have to kind of judge, is this stratagem that you've concocted of trying to use this layer in this analogy, if that analogy doesn't land, it doesn't matter how deep you go into the analogy, it's just not landing. So
Yeah.
I just warn against getting too lost into your own analogy.
And I can just, I mean, if I put my hat back on, you're like, oh, the thing with the penguin goes a layer deeper because the penguin eats gods. Well, let me put my Jesus hat back on. My God can't be eaten.
Yeah.
Solve that problem.
Yeah.
My God
your
existed. My God exists outside space, outside of time, has always existed, will always exist, cannot be destroyed, cannot be eaten. This is definitional. Okay, so now we've got dueling faith-based positions where you think you believe in something that can eat gods, and I believe in something that can't be eaten. How you fix that? I think we lost Pedro, even though.
Oh, I guess so.
Sorry,
Oh, wow.
Sorry, my bad.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's the whole point of the argument I was trying to make. In the end, all religious people have is appealing to faith to support their own beliefs, right? The question if God exists or not is an objective one. And when they don't have any support and evidence to, sustain their claims, the last thing they resort to is faith. And
now that I agree.
We can all appeal to faith.
I agree. I agree that. But the thing is, because of the final conclusion of where you're getting to, you already started in a position of mockery, right? Because at the end of the day,
Yes.
if you're actually trying to use, and mockery is not going to change anybody's mind. In fact, it may entrench them more. Maybe. It depends on the person.
Interrupt?
Right? It depends on the person. Please, Pedro.
I believe mockery to be a very, very useful tool to point out silly beliefs and absurdities. And a lot of the time when we're discussing this with an interlocutor, the interlocutor isn't the final person you want to reach. What sometimes I want to do is expose ideas that don't conform to reality to more people who might be listening to that conversation. And by pointing out, for example, the Tobias or Eric, the God-eating penguin, we are pointing out the absurdity of.
Yeah.
Your audio is broken up again. So.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks, Pedro.
Back. Where did you cut? Where did I get cut?
You're exposing absurdity.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the goal is not necessarily to change the interlocutor's mind, but to point out the absurdity of the interlocutor's
hang on.
View.
Hang on. Do you have a show? Are you doing a show?
No.
Then, okay, I've talked about this before. Most people don't think that they believe merely based on faith. Most people think that they actually have evidence for it. They just don't understand good epistemology. But I think when you push back, yes, you can get to a point where a lot of people will just get to where they're appealing to faith. However, if you say the goal isn't to change the interlocutor's mind and you don't have a show and you don't have an audience, I don't know what you're doing. Because when I engage with a caller, hang on, when I engage with a caller, I'm not necessarily convinced that I'm likely to change their mind, but I'm always going to start with the things that I think should change their mind, because the other people who are listening have the advantage of being challenged without having been directly underneath the spotlight. And so even if the person I'm talking to is unlikely to ever change their mind, as long as I'm making the cases that I think should reasonably change their mind, I can be reaching the many other people who are watching. But if you're just randomly talking to somebody and you're like, oh, I don't care about changing your mind, I just want to spread the absurdity of Tobias, the God-eating penguin, I don't know what you're doing or what you think you're accomplishing. Because if you don't have an audience, whose mind are you trying to change?
So I have group discussions where me and some friends do gather together to have these discussions with people who are invited by the members of the group. So when we have those discussions, although I don't have a show to like publicly open that to everyone, there are people who are engaged in the conversation as I don't know. Sorry, English
It sounds
isn't my
like a
first
club.
language.
It sounds like a club, Pedro. Like you're. It's like, you know. It's like I think about. Okay, we're gonna come in together and we're all gonna shit on religion for a while, and we're all gonna feel better about ourselves, coming up with new ways on how religion is shitty and stupid and illogical, which is completely fair and fine. But it's kind of like that's kind of what it sounds like to me.
But you described it as a bunch of friends.
It is something like that.
You described it as a bunch of friends.
It's a sewing
how many
circle.
of these?
I love it.
How many of these friends are believers?
So 2 of them believers, and they often bring their friends to the discussion.
So you're willing.
I think
so
only
you're
one.
willing. So you're willing to publicly shit on one of your friends in the hopes that you can reach 1 or 2 other people who might have shown up. I mean, I don't know that that's. Oh yeah, you are. I don't know. I don't know how effective that is, but I hope you get some positive results out of it.
Just to clarify, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't believe to be shitting on someone else. I'm shitting on their beliefs. Beliefs have no rights and no feelings.
You are using.
If I shit
you
on,
are using. You are using a friend as a prop for you to make BS arguments against, with no thought about actually changing their mind, in the hopes that you can change somebody else's mind. If I was your friend, I'd call that shitting on me. You know, you don't get to use me as a prop.
How is challenging your beliefs shitting on you?
Okay, so this is an important
You're not
question.
challenging. Yeah, because you're not challenging my beliefs.
Yeah, so this is where it comes down to not everybody is like ourselves, right? You have to think some people who has their beliefs challenged find that as a deeply offensive thing for them, right? Like I've lost family members because, for example, I'm a trans woman. I don't speak to biological members of my family because of that, because I challenge their beliefs, and even seeing me makes them sad, right? So in reality, it's like, even though I've never done anything wrong, so I understand that you feel that logic and things don't hurt people, but like you got to say, like, people are emotional, and what they believe and what they challenge can actually emotionally hurt them. So although I agree with you that people should be able to challenge ideas and not get offended in that perfect interchange of ideas, a lot of people, especially theists, don't like it, and they find it as offensive and harmful to them, regardless of how you feel, right? It's inside of them. You can't control that. You can't control how somebody feels about how you're challenging them. Does that make sense?
Agree, 100% agree. But the fact that I am trying to point out is offense is not something that is given. It's always something that is taken, right? If by saying that Jesus is a fucking bullshit or anything, someone takes offense in that, I'm sorry. I don't care. Jesus is a lie, and if by saying that someone gets offended, I honestly don't give a fuck.
Yeah, but that's your friend circle. That's you, though. That's your choice. That's your boundaries that you've set up. But like, if people don't feel that and you're wanting to keep them around if they don't feel that way, and it sounds like your friends that you're hanging out with, they seem to know that they're going to get some ribbing from their friends about their belief in God and they're still hanging around. Hey, that's probably something that they're dealing with, and they probably are just like, yeah, whatever. I'm Christian because I go to Christmas and celebrate Christmas, right? Like, who knows on what level that is, and it really doesn't offend them. But if they're bringing other theologians into the space, like, you are asking for possibility of hurting somebody by mocking their religion because you said that's your point. And so some people can take offense. You just can't be surprised when they do.
Yeah, I mock religion.
Agree. But many people would say that this show you guys promote that I love is also offensive because it's going against everything they believe in. And you guys don't care about that and continue with the show. And I'm really glad you do.
We actually do care about that. And if I could fucking get a word in edgewise, I was just getting ready to address this. I have no problem mocking beliefs. I have no problem ridiculing beliefs. I have no problem when a caller calls in, they're saying, I want to engage on this subject. I'm going to be the representative. They know what they're getting into when they show up and they call in here. And I'm going to make an honest attempt to change their mind, even though I know they're not likely to change their mind. And I will absolutely ridicule their beliefs, and I will expose fallacies in the hopes that it reaches other people. That's different from if the caller was my mom or my friend, for me to say, you know what? I know I'm not going to reach you, but let me pull out this Tobias the God-eating thing, which is an absolutely dishonest reply to their actual belief, not because I think it's likely to change your mind, but because I can make you look foolish in front of this other person. You're free to do that. And I'm not even saying that there's something necessarily wrong about doing it. I'm saying that's not what you do to a fucking friend, and I wouldn't want to be your friend. The people calling my shows aren't my fucking friends.
Yes, I understand that. And so far, every person who has participated in this group has participated knowing what's going on and willing to do so. So I haven't knocked on any church door to present my argument for.
Yeah,
sorry?
That's fine.
Let me know how many people you've convinced. Let us call me back and let me know how many people you've convinced to give up their religion based on Tobias the almighty God-eating penguin.
I don't think I will convince anyone with the Tobias the God-eating penguin.
Nope. All right, bye.
We are not friends, Pedro. I don't want to be your friends. I don't like the way you treat friends, and I don't like the way you look at this. I have an absolute goal of changing as many minds as I can. I'm willing to try a number of different things. You just called in to talk about something that you know isn't an honest reply to this, that you used to set your friends up to be the butt of your joke, and you don't think it's likely to be successful. You are not like me at all. Stop fucking pretending. One of us cares, and the other one is a fucking meme spreader. All right. Now with all this, let's get to some more calls, because Russell is on hold from Australia, who's an atheist who has a question for Josie. So Russell, welcome. You're on with Josie.
G'day, guys.
Hello.
Josie.
Yeah, I wanted to know, Josie, if you think that all the progress that's been made with socially and scientifically with the trans movement, do you think that the fairy, whatever that you would call that, has set it back, all that progress?
That's a really great question, because it's hard when you're like directly under attack to kind of see the trend lines, right? So, and this is something that Matt was talking about, the MacGuffin about trans issues. So I'll loop some of that in right now too. So essentially, where we are, if you actually look at the victory points on the board, right? And I use this, right? We have, Olivia Hill, trans woman, won in Nashville, Tennessee. You have Nina Dina Martinez Hernandez, who won in Madison, Wisconsin. And by the way, I know you're in Australia. I'm announcing places that are highly conservative that would not likely put a trans person into power if this was the case. Yes.
Okay.
And so, yeah. So basically they won those races. There's more trans people that are winning races across the country. So you would think, and we even won a Virginia senator, and we have a congresswoman running, a person who's running for Congress now who's likely to win in the state of Delaware as well. So we are actually putting points on the board now. When you say, if you look at the country, you have different measures that you can take a look at to say, okay, California, really great for trans people. Maryland, pretty great for trans people. Like, there's all these different places, but there's a lot of hotspots like Florida or Texas or different places. And you would think, oh my gosh, trans people are in a lot of jeopardy. But actually, right now, just like it was for marriage equality, people, before marriage equality started getting talked about, people were pretty much okay with trans people in a sense. They were like, not trans people, queer people, people who wanted same-sex marriages, gay people. They were able to live their lives in somewhat of a weird limbo harmony. And then once marriage equality started becoming into a question, you start seeing the trend line of American sentiment for gay people actually go down, because the most extreme anti-queer, the most extreme anti-gay people are actually trying to stoke the flames to make people fear and use fear response to start saying, oh, maybe gay people shouldn't get married. But as you can see, we still won gay marriage, and the popularity for gay marriage is higher than it has been higher than it ever been. It's still a little bit on the tick down, just a teeny bit, but it's at like 70-80% still. So it's really, really high. So we're seeing the same effect happen with trans people. As trans people are starting to become more visible and are starting to get more rights, the most extreme anti folks in the base are trying to stoke fear and trying to use edge cases to make their neighbors unfamiliar with trans people and make them think that trans people are the proverbial Dwayne Johnson in the dress. So I will say that because the backlash has been so strong, that actually shows evidence that we're actually winning and we're actually doing a lot of work. So, for example, we're still under attack. There was 120 bills across the United States already on January 10th, right now, that have already been proposed to be passed in legislatures. They're probably going to fail, but they're using this as political red meat to use for their extremist base. And they still think it's going to work, even though it's lost every election year. And they have been losing ground on every area except for some states, which is terrible that it's happening, and we still need to fight to this day. So I know that was a long-winded answer because it was a big question, but does that give you, do you have any thoughts about any of that?
Yeah, well, that's it's weird. I was just thinking while you were saying that in Australia, it just feels like we're miles ahead with all that sort of thing, and that if someone was opposed to any of these sorts of things, they would become so unpopular so quickly. Like I work in a high school, and just the changes, the acceptance that I see here, even though I'm right up in the northern part of Australia, is it's just like it's so unpopular to oppose any of that stuff here. So yeah, it's a fucking shame that you have to put up with all that. But I think it's just a matter of time, isn't it? Looking at that, listening to that trans will prevail.
Yeah, we will. And the thing is, we're looking at like 5 to 10 years, right? 5 to 10 years is where public opinion is going to be shifting the most right now. So right now, at least in the United States, I could speak very clearly of the United States. Unfortunately, I can't speak very well internationally. But as far as the next 5 to 10 years in the United States, using the same trend lines that we've noticed for marriage equality, that this is where people's ideas of trans people are the loosest. So we need to try to message to as many people in the middle as possible to try to get them okay and comfortable with trans people, because that window is eventually going to close, and then we have to wait longer to get rights that we don't get in this window. It's tough. It's a tough situation that we're in right now, and that's why trans organizations and support is good, and you're lucky, and the people in Australia are lucky that they have that acceptance rates, because they don't have to deal with this tug of war that we're having to deal with in the United States.
As a trans person, were you, with all this progress going on, when furries started to pop up, were you like, oh fuck, this is going to be just set everything back? Because,
are you talking? You're talking about the mythological fairy?
Furry, like people who identify as animals and want that to be taken seriously.
Oh, furry. Oh, yes. You know what?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to mention that really quickly. It's about the fact that, when you look at trans rights as a movement, right? Trans people have been in the front lines of every single civil rights movement from the beginning, from women's suffrage, civil rights, and so forth and so on. The feminist movement, trans people have really been in the front of all of that. And really what we're fighting for is basic human equality for humans that can basically live and thrive. So when trans people get their rights, because we're only 1% of the population, maybe 2%, I think that we will already be so far ahead that trying to target even a smaller segment of society is going to fail even more spectacularly. And that's why I think that trans rights is really the last frontier of the civil rights movement of all justice for all people, because we are proving as trans people that if you demonize 1%, 2% of the population, it's not politically effective. Now, they were kind of politically effective early in the 60s and, against queer people and gay people, because that was 10% of the population. And even before then, they would go after Black people, which was even larger percentage of the population. So now they're cutting the margins down so much that their ineffectiveness is becoming their downfall. So I don't see any other identity type getting the grasp that trans people have. That's why I consider it's the last frontier. I think people will just get rights as soon as trans people have all theirs.
And I got to jump in with a correction, Russell. Russell.
Sorry, go, man.
I have to jump in with a correction. Furries and Therians aren't the same thing. Therians are the people
I've never heard
that
Therian.
Yeah, Therian are the people who identify as non-human animals. That's who you're talking about, not furries.
That's fair.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Right. Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, and that's even a smaller segment of society, right? So we know that as long as people have rights, that's what's important.
Yeah. Furry, and I'm not trying to offend anybody at all by saying this. I think it's fair to look at furries as closer to cosplay kink type stuff than identity. When it branches out into identifying as a non-human, that is Therian and not furry. And so
that's going to be a conversation that is going to be so online, and it's usually people who identify in those very, I would say, different ways that are deviate from the norm on the spectrum. Usually people who use those type of things legitimately usually do that with their closest friends and don't really make the announcement yet, because we're not at that point in society where people, it's hard enough for me to say I'm trans. There was literally trans violence. There was a violence that happened to a trans woman in my community here in the state who was taken by violence because a delivery driver misgendered her and decided to take her life. So for me, it's I really think about the implications and what that all means. But no, I agree. And for me, it's trans people are trans people, and we're just gonna get our rights for everybody at the same time.
Maybe you can give me one little tip. Maybe you can give me a tip when I'm I work with sort of non-binary people, and you sort of try and always just refer to them rather than her or he as just by their name. But inevitably I fuck it up and will say like she at some point or something like that. Any tips how to avoid that or how to recover from that when I do it?
So first, I think you need to have a conversation with that person and tell them, look, I'm really going to do this. I'm going to use they pronouns when I can. And really, trans people aren't super fragile. If you have conversations and you're actually there in good faith. The problem becomes when people do it meanly on purpose, and then it becomes workplace harassment and assault. Now, I'm not giving you a pass. What that means is that you need to be able to work on that and make sure that the person that you're working on that with is aware that you're trying to get better. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
That's what I would do. Yeah.
It's
all right.
It's not
well,
always now
probably...
is. No, go ahead, Russell.
No, you go, Matt.
No, I'll wait. You were going to wrap up.
Well, actually, I was, if you had time, I know it's probably night time there, even though it's morning here. I had something I've been wanting to ask you, Matt, for ages. If you've got a minute.
If it's super quick, because I got one more call to get to and then super chats, and I don't want to keep Josie all night.
Oh,
actually, I do, but
really cool.
I don't want to be rude to Josie and force her to stay here all night.
Yeah. Sure. All right. So, with given it's an extraterrestrial question, when given the unlikelihood of an advanced civilization, even existing or coming, the unlikeliness of it coming here on the same timeline as we are, all that sort of stuff. When you see in the media credible people talking about this subject, when you ponder that those two conflicting things, where does your mind go?
I don't find credible. Well, people aren't credible. The arguments and evidence are credible. And so I don't find credible people talking about that. I find people who may be respected in one area who are reaching a conclusion that I don't share, that I don't think the evidence warrants. I have friends and acquaintances who are far more leaning into, oh my gosh, now I'm not as skeptical about this UFO thing. And I think that's a failure to kind of understand what skepticism is. I'm just as skeptical about everything as I've ever been, because skepticism isn't measured like that. You're using that. So when it comes to, I have not seen any evidence that warrants believing that the Earth has been visited by extraterrestrial intelligent life at any point in our history that we can identify.
Yeah, and appealing to authority is only one of the epistemology functions that you do to try to prove if something is valid or not. It cannot be used on its own because then it becomes a fallacy. And what I've noticed a lot about the people saying, hey, these credible people are saying this thing, that is almost definition textbook appeal to authority. And I agree with Matt that beyond the appeal to authority, I have not seen anything that is credible enough to say that this is or this isn't the thing.
And the conspiracy required to cover it up, if some of the stories were accurate, the conspiracy level required to cover it up, it's right up there with denying the moon landing or anything like that. But anyway.
If you were to allow your, if you were to sort of entertain the idea that something like that could be real or could have visited, what do you think something like that might be?
Oh,
that's I think something like what might be?
Like an extraterrestrial?
Yeah.
I haven't seen an extraterrestrial. I saw something that looked like I saw something that looked like paper mache. I saw something that looked like a cake. But I think it's irresponsible to speculate when I have no ability to investigate. Oh, here's a picture. Okay.
Russell, just take a look at Men in Black.
Yeah.
Men in Black, Star Wars, Star Trek, they all have good guesses of what extraterrestrial life looks like because that's essentially what we would be doing.
And I know, see, Matt will never say anything stupid. He's
I will.
Everything's always so kept thought out. So I just want to know, though, if you were to just, or just say something did convince you for some reason that maybe, that there was a possibility it was real, would you think it was like an off-world civilization that came here, or something interdimensional, or where do you reckon your mind would go there?
I have no way of knowing. You're saying if I were convinced of something,
I know
be?
you don't know. I know you don't know.
No, Matt, you were writing a sci-fi novel.
If you just wait and let me finish answering your question, I don't have any way of knowing what I would think if I were convinced of X without knowing what the fuck X is.
Sure.
It's not possible.
Okay, that's fair enough.
Yeah, and you, I think I'm ready to hear Matt's like sci-fi short story. Then maybe we can figure out what it is.
Neil deGrasse Tyson was invited to look at the supposed alien body and turned it down, and people gave him shit for it. And then he came out and he's like, no, I turned it down because the people who need to be looking at this thing aren't astrophysicists. And yet, curiously, we don't have good scientific information about this from anybody with any remote expertise in this. Anyway, I got to move on. Thanks, Russell.
Thank you, Russell.
All right. Thank you.
Also, as cishet white dude with 23 buckets of privilege, and yet also active in trans rights things and things like that on occasion, not just because of my partner, but even before we got together. There are people who I have never, ever, ever had the slightest issue misgendering or dead naming. I have several friends who I knew for a considerable time beforehand, who, in one case, I was the first person they told. We're driving around. She's still got a full beard and is like, hey, I wanted to let you know I'm trans and I'm going to, start my transitioning journey. And here's my new name and my new pronouns. And I was like, oh, great. When should I start using that? And it turned out to be a good question because we're at an event together and she still is ostensibly presenting male. And I was, so she's like, you can use it now, but I'm going to be, telling more people in the near future. From that moment forward, for some people, there's a switch that you could just flip and it's like, here's the new name, here's the new pronouns. For other people, for me, it's more difficult. And some of them, it doesn't make sense why. On occasion, I will have more difficulty with some non-binary people just because if you've been used to putting everything in two buckets, having a third bucket, okay, it can be a slight stumbling block. But I saw a great meme that people shared. All of us, for some period of time, some people are probably already over it, are going to accidentally write down 2023 on some form because it's just barely 2024. And that struggle that you have and the frustration that you feel trying to get the year right is real, but you get over it. And you can do the same thing with people's pronouns and names, even if you've known them for a long time, more than a year.
Yeah. And it's about being honest, right? Like it's about having a conversation with somebody that I know have a lot of experience with non-binary people. English is my second language, right? So for me, it was harder to also get non-binary, right? I misgendered somebody. And so for me, it's like, yeah, it's completely valid. It, like, for example, my mother still gets it wrong and I love her dearly, but it's because she raised me for 34 years. And it's like, I give her grace to a point, but I give her grace, and I know she's trying and I know she doesn't mean it in malice. I just wish that she would try harder sometimes, but that's all I can do.
Yeah, it's wild. And of course, as we're getting ready to take the last call and then I'll get into super chats. But it's nice of Josie to remind me again, yet another area where she is superior to me in that she's as good in English as I could ever hope to be. And it's not even her first language. It's, I'm a big dummy sometimes. All right. It's so funny because there's a number of people who'll be like apologizing if they're English, and I'm like, your English is way better than my anything else. So, We have Joshua in California
Hey.
as an atheist. Pronouns are he, him. Joshua, you have, if the call screener has written this down correctly, you have the most curious question I think I've faced in ages. And I will apologize in advance because my initial assessment is not very positive. But it says here, why not give your best arguments for Christianity? Finding out that came from atheists might convince more not to be. Is that, tell me what it is you're asking, because that just doesn't seem right to me.
Yeah, so basically a few weeks ago, I heard, I don't know when it was, but it was on the line, and there was a time you said that you were a little bit scared of, or at least like apprehensive of, giving your best arguments for Christianity because you were afraid of people hijacking them and convincing people of Christianity.
Oh, yeah. I have friends who will argue either side, however, whatever. I don't do that because if I'm successful, then I've convinced someone of something that's not true. It's not about whether or not the arguments are better. It's a thing about a lot of the debates and other things like that. There's propaganda and personality. There is emotional appeals. It's not just the arguments that are the thing. Debates, in fact, are a good chunk of theater as well. But the best arguments for Christianity aren't good enough, in my view. And so even if I were to present them, anybody that found them convincing, I would have intentionally been misleading by presenting arguments that shouldn't be convincing in a way that was convincing. And
That's true.
it's not like there's new evidence, and there's not really new arguments. So at first I thought you were expecting me to go out and come up with an original and better argument for Christianity. And I was like, why would anybody spend time doing that? If there was an original and better argument for Christianity, surely in the thousands of years people have been debating this, somebody else would have come up with it. But I don't know why, if an atheist, so I'm happy to steel man somebody's position. And matter of fact, when we get around to NBOS, we'll probably, there's an entire section that of the format that is about doing that.
No, for sure. So, I mean, basically, like at one point I heard you say, and I agree, that you are better at arguing for Christianity than most Christians. And then after that, you said that you're just a little bit scared of that because people may clip that and convince people of Christianity.
Yeah. And Josh, I just want to say this too. I think that the exercise of entertaining arguments like for yourself, like you just like, oh, I'm just going to try to, philosophically create an argument to try to test your own logic. It's like playing chess against yourself. I think there can be value in trying to like figure out your own like logical, like, connective tissue of how you think about things. It's like, if I were to think this is the best type of argument, you can maybe then take a meta point of view and analyze why you think that's the best argument and then look into that. But it seems like a completely intellectual exercise to kind of do that, because you're just challenging yourself like you would challenge yourself in a game of chess. You still can't really win because you're just challenging yourself in a game of chess. Somebody's going to win, you're going to lose, or you're going to end up in a draw, but it's always you. So that's kind of how I think about that. But I think it's a good exercise. That's how I used to do speech and debate in college. I would challenge, I would support positions that I fundamentally didn't agree with and still win the debates because it was about the intellectual challenge. But that's in a format where it's the stage is set for that. So it's an intellectual space. So it's like in an educational setting. Outside of that educational setting where the boundaries are set and it's already told to the audience that these people may not believe the positions that they're arguing for, it doesn't really go beyond that. And I think it's very academic, if that makes sense.
No, I understand for sure. It's just that I know that, I guess what I interpreted Matt to be saying is that like he tries not to make those arguments for Christianity, even though he could like talk about them. And in my opinion, if I were a Christian, because when I heard him say that, I thought about it, and like if I were a Christian and I found out the person who made the best arguments for Christianity was an atheist, that would obliterate any type of foundation I had for my belief. I would end up going and trying to figure out who that person is and why they believe what they believe.
Then we need to fix that, because the best arguments are the best arguments, and whether they're presented by an atheist or a theist is irrelevant. Who presents an argument has no bearing on how good it is, how good it should be, how good it should be viewed. None of that. So if you would find an argument for Christianity more compelling because it came from an atheist, you are engaged in a particularly devastating potential logical fallacy.
I know. It's like a kind of a type of ad hominem, isn't it?
Well, the thing is, you can also talk about the foundations of where religion comes from. Like the people who created religion in the Bible, like you're talking about like Roman emperors and, trying to, destroy feast days and pagan holidays, and how, Catholic sainthood was all like, there wasn't a lot of people who were like godly in the godly sense. They were basically creating that. So there have been atheists who have taken the position against theists about the fact that the people who wrote the Bible itself weren't actually Christians, and that they used it as itself. So, but that again is just one evidence or point that you can use to say, okay, this thing isn't as holy as it actually is. But yeah, I think that's only one evidence piece. I think that you should continue to find others. Right? Is it the fact that an atheist can make this good argument, the thing that you chose to leave theist beliefs, or is it because you thought that faith isn't a very good, reliable indicator to finding out what is true or not? Right? Those two things are very different, right? Because if you can say faith isn't a reliable feature to find out what is true, that's going to be a more reliable reason why you're not theist than Matt made a good argument one day.
No, that's true. I might figure that out though once I start listening to Matt's videos. If I were to ever investigate it, just if I were to see a clip of Matt, and then I would try to find out who he was, I would find that that argument in particular, like faith is not a good reason to believe or things like that. And I personally, I think
I'm not saying, and I don't mean. I'm not trying to say that faith isn't a good reason to believe. What I said was faith is not a good indicator of reliably knowing what is truth. Because I'm not trying to say religion in itself is bad. I'm just saying that the tool of faith is not a good indicator of relying on what is truth. Right? It's those little things that make a difference, because I don't want to attack somebody's faith. I'm just saying that faith isn't a good indicator of truth. Right? That's it. Does that make sense?
It's definitely not. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not trying to tell you that it is, other than I'm just saying that's what I believe. I'm not telling you to believe that, if that makes sense. That is something you have to come to a conclusion on your own, right? That isn't something that I can just tell you and then you say, you know what, that's right. That is a conclusion that you should be able to come up with on your own, because that's going to give you a better foundation of your belief set. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, for sure. Definitely.
Yeah, I want you to know why, not just because I said it.
No, yeah, I completely understand. I like, in my opinion, it kind of scared me a bit when Matt said that, because I just think it would be awesome if Matt made videos making the best arguments for Christianity and then destroying. I'm sure I've seen many things like that before by Matt, but it just scared me a little bit, because I know that he's capable of making the best arguments and then convincing people as to why they don't work.
I've addressed the best arguments. It's literally my patreon.com/atheist debates thing. I go through the best Christian arguments and deconstruct them.
You do, for sure. I totally understand. Anyway, the other question I had was about deism, if you want to touch on it.
Go ahead.
What is it?
What's the question?
Yeah.
Basically, okay, so like I think it was maybe a week ago, I heard a call come in, and he was talking about deism, and I know you and Jimmy have said many times about how if you're a deist, you believe in a God that's undetectable.
Right. The God of deism.
Like the epiphany.
What if what? Go ahead. No, what if what? You're going to add something.
Like the epiphany I had is like, what if there was a God that started the universe at the beginning, but they left clues?
Okay. The deistic God is specifically defined as a God that does not intervene in the universe in any detectable way. Leaving clues would be a violation of the very definition of a deistic God.
It's based on your interpretation. You're getting meaning of things and saying they're clues when you can't factually prove that they're clues at all.
I get it. I just thought
if there was a God that it's like if there's a God, a God that created everything and like left a signature in DNA, that's not a deistic God because that God has now done something that is detectable. Deistic God is specifically a God that doesn't intervene in reality in any detectable way, and leaving clues, leaving a signature, whatever that would point you to it, is a violation. That's just not a deistic God.
Okay, just to clarify, what like intervening in any way? But I mean, if he makes the universe, that's doing something. But what if, like, at the very, very beginning, that's what put everything in motion, and he couldn't help but, or like whatever universe he made couldn't help but leave traces.
You're proving.
I mean,
you're proving the internal inconsistency when you said that, right? You are stumbling. You're answering your own question, right? You're like, oh, if you put in a message, then it wouldn't be like that. That's what we're just trying to say. In the strict sense of deitism, then it wouldn't exist. That's what I hear you making, like a rational conversation about a logical consistency that you've already uncovered. Does that make sense? Because you're trying to rationalize out of the inconsistency right now.
Yeah, I guess I think I was just misunderstood about what a deist was. I thought it was just some like a believing in a God that doesn't intervene, not necessarily like past the beginning. But I didn't know that it meant like even leaving traces from the beginning, even though he hasn't intervened at all, or he or she or whatever hasn't intervened at all. But like if there were traces, specifically, that was the thing I was thinking of, is like maybe in DNA it says like, there's English letters that write out I am, created by God or something like that.
That would be directly intervening and interacting with reality, because life didn't begin at the beginning of the universe. The deistic God, at best, got everything running and left it alone. And the very concept is untestable because it's unfalsifiable. And so if you found something, all you could do is say, I suspect that this would be a remnant of the kind of thing a deistic God would not be able to hide if he created the universe. But you have no way of demonstrating that you're correct. You're just saying, I think if a deistic God created the universe, then we would find this. Well, that is about your inferences about what a deistic God would or wouldn't do, or could or couldn't do. And how much of an understanding do you and I have of the capabilities of a being that could create a universe and then not intervene?
Yeah, zero.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so in any case, deists are either claiming to have found what they can't find, or claiming to find what is now irrelevant because it doesn't intervene. So if you found like, oh, well, there is a God, but now we don't know anything about it other than it created everything and left some, like a fingerprint. You don't know anything about it. You don't know what it likes, what it wants. You don't know if it still exists. You don't know. You've found out nothing particularly useful other than there's a fingerprint. Well, what is that fingerprint? When it comes down to it, when you look at what we can and can't investigate and explore about the universe. If somebody finds a fingerprint, cool, we can talk about it then.
No, for sure. I understand. It's just like concerns me every time we bring up deism. Is like, that's what I mean. Is I just can't get past the idea that if I were a god and I started a universe, would there not be possibly a way that I made that universe and put everything in motion where even if life didn't begin at the beginning of the universe, it would be inevitable that life would come about, and it'd be inevitable that, because I could make it that way. I'm God. That life would have traces of.
Could you also make it not that way?
I don't want to interrupt. But I want to just take a second at that, because I understand what you're saying. It sounds like to me you're basing that on faith, that may be true, right? And so the idea of like, hey, I may believe that this is that thing, that is what faith is, right? You have faith that this could be true, so therefore it might be to you. And that's what I'm trying to say is when you rely on
we have no idea what happened before, or what happened before the Big Bang,
we don't.
or anything like that.
So there you go. There's the answer. You just said it. We don't know. And
I know,
that's where we begin, right?
I know we don't know, but I'm just saying, like, when someone claims to be a deist, if they have an idea of God that entails some type of traces or fingerprint, like Matt says, like that would be detectable. It's not just because he doesn't interact now or died immediately after creating the universe. If there's some type of fingerprint, it may not be detectable. I'm not saying it's a good argument for deism. I'm just saying that maybe deism is not necessarily believing in a God that's completely undetectable. Maybe he doesn't interact.
But we're talking. So I want to zoom out real quick, okay? So we're having a conversation about a belief set, right? And the boundaries that exist within that set. So you're saying deism is this thing, and therefore, but it doesn't really matter, right? Because at the end of the day, it's the individual belief of the person, and the boundaries and all of the things that matter, you can try to add as much as you can, but you're still dealing with a philosophical mindset. And that is something that no matter how you want to try to explain it or think of other ways of doing it, we're still talking in an academic sense, right? Everything that we talked about actually doesn't have a grounding in the lived reality of the world. We are all basing this on the idea that there might be a fingerprint, there may be this, and the way that deism is maybe not seen properly, we're just speculating the basis of how that philosophy is. And that's why for me, I don't subscribe to any of that. I'm just secular, right? I just live in the real world, and in the observable world, not the real world, the observable world. I live in the observable world, and that's how I look at it. And I don't need other philosophies to help me guide me to where I am now.
I got to jump in and stick a fork in all of this, Joshua.
Yeah.
Deists think that they are detecting God. They're looking around at nature, and they think that nature provides some fingerprint, some evidence, whatever, about a God as a creator. That's what they think. But they also have defined deism as a God that doesn't intervene. The issue is not, oh, what if there is a God that they've detected? It's, have they detected this God? And to date, no deist has ever been able to demonstrate that what they think is a fingerprint of God is actually a fingerprint of God. And they've also defined,
I understand.
They've also defined God in a way that there couldn't be a fingerprint. Because in the same way that you did this, what if God created it in such a way where there's a fingerprint? You could just easily say, what if God created it in such a way where there's not? What if you're able to create a universe? Can you create a universe where you don't leave any sort of hint? And is it possible that despite leaving no source of a hint, that people inferred one anyway? I mean, it's a complete waste of time. Deism is a useless proposition. It is a useless God. It is a useless bit of information. even if you were to prove conclusively right now that deism is true, it doesn't change anybody's life ever, because that God doesn't intervene. It doesn't want anything. There's no afterlife implications. There's no morality implications. There's nothing. All you've done is conclusively demonstrated that there was some being who doesn't want fuck all to do with us, who made the universe. Well, congratulations.
Yeah, that's right.
No, you're right.
Live your
gotta
life
go.
to the fullest.
Go ahead.
I gotta go, Josh. Well, we got to get on super chats
Yeah,
and wrap
we
this
do.
up. Or
Thank you,
Josie will
Josh.
never want to come back and do 4-hour shows with me
I
again.
know.
But I appreciate the call.
Thank you, Joshua.
By the way, there's not a ton of super chats, but there are always more that are going to come in as we do this. As we're getting set up for the super chats, huge thank you to the Apostate Paul, who was our screener today, and all of our moderators. We have a list of super chats. Are you able to stay for them, or have I kept you so long that you need to go?
Yeah, I'm good. I blocked off time. We're good.
In that case,
it's already so late right now. Doesn't matter anymore. No meetings. Everything's done.
Oh, hold on. I might have made a mistake, because that was my test super chat, and the one I just sent to start the list didn't go. So
that's allegedly human.
There we go. This is the actual first super chat.
I will let you begin the reading. You read first.
Okay, $10 from Nadi Yvette Chambers. I'm gonna Rush Doni 18. I see. This is bad. I can't pronounce words that aren't. See, now you're getting me. Christian Reconstructionalist. Rushuniite, thank you. Thanks for letting me struggle for so long. I appreciate you, man. Christian Reconstructionalist.
I was responding to Jimmy, so I got distracted. That's why I was having you read the first one.
Oh, okay, I got it. And various allied groups have few, if any, qualms about saying LGBTQ people should be unalived to a point of no longer existing. Granted, it's a smaller radius. Can you help me translate this?
Yep, this is what somebody called about, because earlier I was talking about how evangelical Christianity isn't simply radical Islam. And still, I appreciate this, Nadia, and what we talked about earlier. There are plenty of small sects of Christianity that are happy to say things like LGBT people should not be allowed to live. They're not as forthright in saying people should be killed merely for disbelief or for mockery of beliefs, although those exist as well. They're just not a significant portion of the population, but also they're not evangelical Christians. As a matter of fact, there was a quote about Christian Reconstructionists from, I had it earlier, that was basically saying Christian Reconstructionists are a fringe set that have views that are antithetical to evangelical Christianity. But I don't get to decide who's a real Christian or who's a real evangelical or any of that stuff. I was complaining about a very specific aspect of a specific meme. If you want to say, hey, there are Christians out there who are absolutely awful and would wish death and enforce death upon a variety of people for a variety of reasons, you're absolutely right. I just don't think that there is significant a portion of the Christian community as the Muslims are who've told me to my face that I should be killed for pointing out that their prophet Muhammad was a child raping piece of shit. 1999 from Greg Markowski. One of my cats had a very successful surgery today as a side benefit. It was a lot less expensive than planned. So here's a few bucks in celebration. Oh, thank you, Greg. And Greg's normally in first. We have, obviously, we're looking for a new vet in the Austin area, mainly because we need to find somebody who is a reptile expert. I have 8 different species of snakes and 3 species of lizards. So we have 11 species technically that we work with, and finding a vet that we can go to, that's going to be a big deal.
Yeah,
so I'm glad that worked out, Greg.
Okay, $10 from Major Payne. Hey Matt, I jumped on a bit late and saw your statements on radical Islamist. Do you ever have any concerns for your safety due to the situation like Charlie Hebdo? How do you mitigate?
All the time. I don't have security at the level that Sam Harris does. I think Sam goes overboard, but I also I've told, I'm happy to, I don't have a problem with Sam. Sam gets to decide how much security he has, and that's fine. You know, have as much as you need. I don't feel the need for that much, but is it a concern? You bet. And the last debate that I did against Daniel Hakikachu, I asked for security at the debate. It's the only debate in my entire life where I specifically asked for security. And yet still, the security person who was there was a little slow, but sorry. Yeah, I have concerns about that stuff, but there's a limit to how much I can do. And I'm going to live my life, and I'm going to exercise freedoms, and I'm not going to let, this is one of the things I showed during that debate with Daniel. I'm not going to let a bully shut me down. Daniel tried during that debate to let his bully flag fly by saying, you wouldn't come over here and say that. And so I stood up and calmly walked the 3 feet and said, where would you like me to stand to say it? Now, at that point, James, the moderator, got up to make sure that I wasn't going to do anything violent, which I understand is his job to make sure of that, except that there was no chance at all that I was going to do anything violent. I'm just not going to sit over there and be told, you wouldn't say that to my face. The fuck I wouldn't. I absolutely would. Could you jump up out of your chair and kill me before somebody could do something about it? Yes, but the truth matters and integrity matters. And if you understood the truth and you understood integrity, you would not have uttered the words that I would not come over and say that to your face. That is a bullying attempt. And I don't care if it's a professional paid debate or not. I'm not going to sit there and let you bully people around. And because somebody else is going to shut up when Daniel says that. And he and the other Muslim individual were both telling the crowd to shut up and sit down. Shut up, sit down, shut up, sit down. I'm the one on stage. Okay. Whatever you say. Still not going to bully me around. $10 from J Noble Stay Global. Hey, Matt. Love you, big homie. Thank you. Been watching since you, Russell Ashley, and the Oreo eater used to get down. Just kidding, Martin. Learned so much for you. Thank you, sir. Favorite snake movie? Stay Global. Favorite snake movie? It'll be a documentary. It'll be a documentary.
Probably. Yeah, definitely. Something Edinburgh, narrates. That would be my favorite. Or we're thinking maybe like Anaconda or Snakes on a Plane. Maybe it's more of that type of movie.
I'm not too keen on snake movies, but documentaries. Yeah, if there was something. Actually, Dave Kaufman did a kind of a rehash of the Ball Python movie. There are 2 different Ball Python movies out there, but I'd rather watch new educational content on snakes, and I'd rather be making new educational content on snakes. So yeah, but thanks, Jay.
Hey. 1999 from Jason Friedman. My 12-year-old atheist daughter has been identifying with Therian culture, sans spiritually. It hasn't caused her harm, so my partner and I are supporting her investigation thoughts. Any experiences with it? Thanks. I don't have any personal experience with people who identify as Therians, but I do believe it's not causing any harm, whatever kind of way, especially when you're 12. Like, they're still young, and it's like it's there's so much that is around that, and we don't know. And the young kids, they're living their lives. They identify as so many different pronouns and things like that. So I think that what is happening right now is supportive, and just letting this person be able to live their lives in this way, and as long as it's not causing any harm to anyone or themselves, then I think that you should just go ahead and be fine with it. And we'll see what happens when they grow up. So, yeah.
I'm probably going to piss some people off right now. No, I'm kidding. I don't really think this is going to piss some people off. My take on Therians, first of all, you say Therian sans spirituality, so they're not adding a spiritual component to it. They're not going down and claiming they have the soul of a cat or whatever else. I don't have an issue with that. I'm not fully convinced that Therian stuff should be included along with transgender issues or transgender rights, because now we're no longer talking about gender. We're talking about something additional. I'm not going to make any sort of statement about how valid it is or where it is on, should we be looking at this from a mental health aspect or anything like that. Let me say this. Generally speaking, we're talking about transgender issues. There is a need to make sure that we don't force people to go through a puberty that is going to make them regret having to have gone through that. There's a real timeline of puberty where there's going to be some sort of change. And so there's a reason to get involved on that. To the limits of my understanding on Therian issues, and Josie touched on this, there's no such time limit there. There's no, I'm going to transition to a cat. That's not a thing that anybody has to worry about now.
No.
And so let kids explore, let kids be. If there is something that has become a problem that is impacting their life and other people's lives, maybe in a negative sense, okay, get some counseling, get some therapy, go down that route. But if you and your partner are just being supportive, and you until there's a time to be worried about potential harm, don't worry about potential harm.
I think I want to add this too. Yeah, you're right, and I will add this. I would really start talking about. I would ask flatly, do you see yourself as a transgender person? Do you feel that? And then I would also highly recommend a pediatric psychologist. Do it, because you don't know if this is something that they're maybe playing around with gender in a way that maybe makes them feel good, because they're only 12. So however that looks. So I would definitely call in a professional. I recommend this for all children that are especially experience some form of gender nonconformity. I get and start talking, because that doctor is going to be your first line of defense when it starts coming down to, wait, I'm actually not Therian, I'm actually the gender not assigned at birth. Yep. Right? And that is what's most important. So please, to be supportive, to fully support their journey, get a pediatric psychologist. You'll be very happy for doing that, and it will definitely fill in all the blanks of any unease or misgivings you may have just naturally in the new experience of having this rainbow child, it seems. So yeah, good luck with that, and I highly recommend.
And it's critical because, if there is a psychological issue, and I have no way of knowing, somebody needs to diagnose that, but they can't diagnose it until there's been enough people coming forward with this, talking to the therapist, for people to start writing about it, and for the experts to start discussing it, so that you can, this may turn out that Therian's bullshit. It may turn out that Therium is a different type of trans thing. It may turn out that it's something completely different, and yet it's normal. How we treat and deal with something like claims of Therianism in 20 years depends on what you guys do now with a child that's identifying this way and getting them counseling. If everything you do is going to make it so that people 10, 20, 30 years from now have better access to better treatment and care and support, whatever it turns out to be.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Thanks for the question.
Thank you. Yeah. $10 from Monkey at Typewriter. I love Josie. Me too. But I hate hearing about all the things she does. It makes me seem profoundly unproductive. Me too. Also, I worry that every hour she's here, there's a cat going unrescued in a tree somewhere. You're gay, homie. Thanks, Monkey at Typewriter. Do you rescue cats too?
Love it. Not. I've never rescued a cat. I've rescued a dog once. That actually is a true story.
Well done.
1999 from Ryan, and please forgive my pronunciation. Sahil. I'm sorry. When does consent become informed consent? Or slash and how fuzzy is the line between the two? And so this is interesting, right? Because there's a lot of when I think of informed consent, I think of a medical setting. And so I like if an adult has informed consent, they can go in and get their medical procedures that they need to better their lives. And when I think of consent in general, that is the person saying, I allow whatever is happening to be happening right now in that person, whatever is going on, or the request or whatnot. So I don't know how to answer this question effectively, because I don't know if there is a line between the two. I don't know if that's the right way to frame it. So I wish I had more clarification, Ryan, on how you're asking it. Unless Matt, you know how to address this question.
Well, it's a complicated subject, but in the simplest terms, informed consent is the presence of a yes and not merely the absence of a no. It is a presence of a yes after an individual has been of an age of responsibility and a demonstration of mental capacity, which means, you may have the mental capacity and okay, let me do this again. The presence of a yes, not merely the absence of a no, that is accompanied by an absence of coercion, an absence of disinformation, and the presence of apparent reasonable comprehension of the situation. How do you narrow it down? It is difficult, but if you're underage, you can't consent. If you're mentally impaired, whether through just general mental faculties that aren't up to the reasoning standards of the normative expectation of a person, or if you're impaired by chemicals and other things, you cannot consent. If you've been groomed and guided, that is the absence of that is the imposition of one person's will to guide you towards a particular conclusion. So it's really it can be difficult, and yet it's really not. If you're, and depending on what you're talking about, like, hey, let's have sex. If you are of legal age, a generally responsible, unimpaired adult engaging with someone similar, another unimpaired adult, the types of things you need to make sure that you're engaging with informed consent, the only objections I ever see are dudes that say it kills the mood. And I'm like, if getting consent kills the mood, you never had informed consent. Oh, but we were dancing and it got all hot and heavy and we started making out. Yeah, it doesn't have to be a sign on the paper of I hereby consent to PIV sex, but not anal. You don't have to go through and list everything in explicit detail. That could help. That could actually be fun if that's something you guys are actually into. But generally, it's the only time this question comes up is when there's a reasonable doubt or suspicion that consent wasn't proper. And if that's the case, you know it. I mean, you might not, but I mean, if you're not sure that you have the enthusiastic consent, you don't yet.
Yeah. And to go into the thing, since, as trans person here, I will say that, when you're talking about young people and the consent, this is where a lot of this conversation happens, where like, can young people consent to this? It's like young people consent to medical procedures all the time with their parental and doctors' consent. That's how we make sure that we're not harming people when they can't take consent, such as children. So the children get medical care, and this is the key words that I want you all to think about when you're thinking about a minor that is experiencing gender dysphoria. Consistent, insistent, and persistent. If a minor is showing those three things with their gender dysphoria, then they have gender dysphoria, right? That is what it is. And then at that point, there are medical treatments that have been approved by every medical major association in the country and in a lot of places across the world. That is how you are able to provide medical care for someone who is a minor. So it's just a treatment, just like getting an appendix out. Guess what? When a doctor does a diagnosis for somebody who gets their appendix out, the parent is there too. And the doctor's like, hey, these are the things that are happening. We need to do this. And then they do that, right? So I want to make sure that when things get fuzzy and the lines between the two get blurred, they're usually intentionally blurred because they refuse to share the fact that inside of that consent for gender affirming care, in particular in this example, is done by an army of physicians that understand this inside and out, including the parent, to say, okay, I want this and this is okay for my kid. And so there are so many guardrails and barriers because it goes beyond just informed consent and consent when you're talking about that level of medical procedure, which is very rarely done in this country and our world.
There are things you can consent to, even if there are other things you can't consent to. And the legal parent or guardian is there to protect the rights of the kid, as are medical ethicists and a bunch of other stuff. You know who's not involved? You. You're not involved in any other doctor-patient relationship ever on the fucking planet. If you are not the patient, the doctor, or the legal guardian of one of the patient, ain't none of your fucking business. I'm so tired of hearing about, you're going to hear this more every time you do transatlantic and stuff, but I'm so tired of, I really wanted to call in today because I'm right there with you. I support everyone's right to identify as their, as they feel and everything else. I just where we part company a little bit is I'm a little uncomfortable with trans women in sports, and every time I hear that, I want to say, so fucking what? Are you the sport governing body? Are you the person? Your opinion is irrelevant here. And the only reason I'm willing to sit here and have this argument with you is so that you stop thinking that it is. But
yeah, exactly. Happens every time.
Yeah.
All right.
$10.
A $10. Oh, that's you. No, it is you. Go for it.
I don't know, but I'll do it. $10 for PhD. Tony, I accept practical problems, but game theory of optional voting is moderates undervalue their vote. Extremists highly value the vote. Politicians are economically incentivized to target extremists. Yeah. Yeah, they are.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's because that's where the activity on the base. It's like, you build up your base and you try to do this, and it's very, very frustrating. But we are winning. It just feels like we're not, because the media always points at the extremists because they think that's where everybody wants. So because they're the loud, squeaky wheel, and they think that they're the most important. Annoying. So NZ, that's New Zealand, right? So that's $20 New Zealand from Deepak Stevens. For my man Dave, I will miss your show, but I hope you enjoy the time you have left with happiness and love. all the people who have benefited from your show will always remember you. I know I sure will. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Deepak Stevens. Yes, I didn't address it today because I wasn't sure if any announcement or anything else had gone out, but I just talked to Jimmy, and the community tab for the channel has information. But yes, Dave Warnock will no longer be doing Dying Out Loud. And I love Dave. Wish him all the best. I completely understand. He's got bigger issues to deal with, and things are getting more difficult. And I will update when I hear from him and when I can. But thanks so much, Deepak, for covering that. $10 from Joanne Bell. As a non-binary person, I appreciate everything Josie, Matt, and the line in general does for the trans community. Also, I'll miss Dave. I found this show through him. I wish him all the best. Yeah. Everybody wants nothing but the best for Dave. And anybody who doesn't can fuck off.
That's right. $9.99 from Michael Farmer. Matt, a full beard really suits you. Hashtag Team Beard.
Thank you. I'm a little annoyed with it right now, but that's only because years of having the goatee means that this part is longer, and so it's not quite blending with the stuff on the side yet. It's going to take another month or so. But what I did right before the show is I took a comb and I parted it out to the side to get it to where it goes in there. But now I got little curly cues on one side or the other, so I'm never gonna be happy with it till it's all even. But thanks, Michael.
Hair takes time to grow.
Yeah, I spent years mostly cutting it off. When I got out of the Navy, I didn't get a haircut for maybe 3 or 4 years.
Nice.
And
Good
it
for
was
you.
I had a proper ponytail down to not quite mid back, but yeah, it was important
Good
that
choice.
Yep. It was until the hair on top of my head began to. It was always thin and fine, so it always looked thinner than it was. But I didn't want to be the bald guy at the club with a ponytail, so I eventually just cut it all off, and it's better this way.
It works. It works. You rock it well. It's that wisdom you were talking about.
Yeah. This is when you or me.
This is you.
$20 from Dead Pirate Tattoo. Hard solipsism. Beyond an agreed upon experience, how do I attack this conundrum? I don't know. When you figure it out, let me know. I can tell you how I attack. Because I think from the standpoint of everybody, maybe we'll talk about it a little bit with Kane B next week. There is no solution that I'm aware of. No hard solution to the problem of hard solipsism. My take on it is pretty simple. If some version of hard solipsism is true, then if the version where I am, everything is a fiction except for me, then that means I'm making it all up, which means I've written every good song. I've taught myself everything that I know, including things that are demonstrably true in the reality I experience and consistent. And I've also been every confused, shitty caller that I've dealt with to these shows in all these years. And I've also been every brilliant person that's ever taught me something. That to me seems absurd. Now, if another version of hard solipsism is true and I'm a brain in a vat being fed a reality, then somebody else is out there doing it. And I have no way to demonstrate that that's not the case. I just don't think that that's a very parsimonious situation. Like Occam's razor is often used saying, oh, the simplest explanation is often the best. That's not Occam's razor. Occam's razor is about don't multiply entities unnecessarily. And so if I stick to Occam's razor, then I experience a reality. I can't demonstrate whether or not it's the ultimate reality. It would be a mistake, and it would be literally adding another unnecessary entity to assert that all of reality is a fiction being created by some extra reality. So for that, hard solipsism violate either I'm doing everything, in which case I'm awesome and I suck and I really need some therapy, or it's just a violation of Occam's razor.
Right. $20 Canadian from Michelle. Keep up the good work. Longtime listener of Matt and many more. I appreciate all of you. Oh, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. $20 from Larry Fishman. Obligatory, I'm not a doctor, but before I started MTF HRT in late March 23, I did not feel like a human or really even alive. I felt like an alien piloting the wrong mech suit. I wonder if Therians are similar. Yeah, like it was Josie's speculative point there as well. And it's worth investigating to see what we can find out. But I'm glad you're feeling more human.
Absolutely. Yeah. I remember my transition to when I started. I felt like I had like a perfect balance, and I just felt like I was in a Zen moment for a moment, and then it was like then it shifted again. So it was like I was like losing my train of thought, and I was like, but it's an interesting feeling.
Thanks so much, Larry.
$20 from Biashana. Next goal wins. True story with a lovely non-binary actress, and Michael Fassbender was ruined by cries of trans agenda. Has anyone seen it? IO. I don't know if that's IUO. Is
that's
it
in your
more?
Opinion.
In your opinion, thank you. I'm so bad. Oh my gosh. In your opinion, is it more hurting or helping showing films that films like that to people like that?
So I'm not familiar with this film, Next Goal Wins, but it's evidently a true story. And so you say lovely non-binary actress. I'm wondering if the character was non-binary as well. It would seem strange to me for somebody to object by yelling trans agenda if merely, you know, if merely the actor or actress was trans instead of the character. I don't know what is the agenda. Let's employ trans people, because I'm down with that agenda as much or more as the other trans agenda that people think we're supporting.
Yeah, absolutely. We should always cast roles that, like, especially for marginalized people to be marginalized. Like, so like a trans person playing a trans character should probably be a trans person. Or not probably, should be. And so I don't know very much about the situation, but if a non-binary person played the non-binary character, then I don't know why anybody's crying about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't have anything to add to that one, but thank you so much, Biasha.
Sorry, I don't know about that movie. I'll check it out though. Thank you.
Which I probably said wrong. Yeah. $10 from Monkey to Typewriter. Josie. Oh, I totally also rescued a dog. Me, I friggin' give up. Dog's the best animal. Just let us know if you've ever had to leave because your home world needs you, and stay away from green rocks.
Oh, you're so sweet.
You can't call my friends aliens.
I actually rescued the dog while I was on a canvas. So I was actually doing volunteer work at the time that I'm just caking it on. I'm just being facetious at this point.
None of us are ever going to measure up, and but we should keep trying.
So $9.99 from Pint. Matt, question. So my mom is heavy in Shintoism. From what I know, it respects a lot of nature and has no afterlife rewards. She asked, does she still need a burden of proof? Thank you.
Yep.
Stay healthy.
Yeah. So here's the thing. The burden of proof is just about, are you making some claim, any claim? And the burden of proof only exists. I mean, you don't ever have to meet it if you're not trying to convince anybody else. But the reason I like to stress this is, if you are convinced of something, then you are convinced that you satisfied a burden of proof for yourself. And if you satisfied a burden of proof for yourself, you should be able to explain to everybody else what did that. If I'm convinced, like we rearranged stuff in the living room today, I'm convinced it's better. Why? Well, there's a little more room, a little less clutter. It feels more open. It feels like we could have more people there. I can at least explain it. If those are bad reasons, then they're bad reasons. It doesn't matter whether the belief or the position that I'm accepting or advocating for says something about an afterlife or not. If I say, "Oh, I'm really into Shintoism." Well, what does that mean to be into Shintoism? Are you guiding your life based on these precepts? There are plenty of religions and philosophical kind of guidances, self-help gurus abound that aren't advocating for an afterlife, but they're giving advice. And either the advice is good for guiding your life or it's not. In some cases, it may be that we don't have an objective way to assess this. And so, your mom could be into Marvel movies and just decide that, because I am, and just decide that the Marvel movies are the best movies. Okay, well, congratulations, and I like ice cream. But if you're talking about a guiding philosophical worldview, then it's probably making some claims and it's probably impacting how you live your life and how you're making decisions. You should at least be able to say, I feel better when I'm doing this, and so far, nobody's demonstrated where it's doing some harm to me or somebody else. And for the most part, I'm fine with anybody saying, hey, I do this because I like it, and nobody's been able to demonstrate where it's doing any harm yet. So maybe your mom doesn't have to explain anything to anybody, because none of us owe anybody else an explanation for who we are or what we believe or anything else. It's more about, if I wanted to explain it to you, I would have a burden of proof, which should be easy to meet because I've already met it for myself. And if I'm unwilling, and keep this in mind when you hear callers to these shows who are cocksure that they have found the one true God and know what that one true God wants, if they're unable to present an explanation for why they're convinced, maybe they're not actually calling to try to convince us, because some part of them wants us to convince them. Lots of different ways to get there, but whether it's pint or pint, thanks so much for that great question. And the final super chat of the night, although I'm sure while I'm wrapping everything up, somebody is going to send in a super chat. I want to get back to the one question real quickly, which is this: what is the current hot issue that you're working on that people need to know about, and how can they help?
Yeah. So right now I am currently working on what's going on in Ohio with trans candidates that have been disqualified off of the ballot. So there were two candidates. One trans woman was disqualified off of a ballot because of an obscure law that was written to basically say, outside, if you've changed your name out with the exception of marriage, and you did it within the last 5 years, you were supposed to petition for signatures to get onto the ballot with your previous name. None of this was written in any forms, any candidate handbooks or anything like that, but they disqualified Vanessa Joy, who was running for that seat. Now, the other trans woman is now being challenged by the county GOP leader to the chair of the GOP to disqualify this other trans woman, Ariane. And then we have a non-binary candidate who was forced to run with their previous name or their dead name, rather than actually being able to change it to their legal name. So there are shenanigans going there. Also, the fact that Ohio, I don't know if Ohio is trying to be the next Florida. I'm very confused about how quickly it's flipped there as far as how aggressive they're going. So they're trying to limit adult care, or all minor care for transition related care gone, and they want to limit adult care as well, for transition related care as well. So that's where I'm working on currently. But I will say very soon, I know a lot of you maybe know me with the US Trans Survey. I actually have a draft to the first snippet of information that I have in my inbox that I'm actually reviewing right now. So that indicates that something's coming out soon for the U.S. Trans Survey. So I know a lot of people in the line know the U.S. Trans Survey, so something's coming soon. So that's something to get excited about as well. So there's a lot going on. I could go on for another 30 minutes, Matt, on different things that I'm working on that are issues. But that is the ones right now currently are trying to make sure that candidates stay qualified to be able to run in these ballots. And I will say about Ohio too, every single one of these trans candidates in Ohio are all running unopposed Democratic primaries, because the Democratic Party has retreated from those districts because they're so heavily Republican. So these Republicans are challenging these trans people because they don't want to run against a trans Democrat. And because they know that the second a trans person runs against them, that's the only thing they're going to be able to talk about, while the trans person's actually going to be able to talk about issues. So
whose fault is that?
That's the reality. Exactly.
Whose fault is it that that's the only thing you can fucking talk about? And oh my gosh, that's the talking point to end all. Why on earth, if it's not relevant to how I'm going to do this, or, why does my transness, why should it be an issue at all? And yet that's all you can talk about. You guys are so obsessed.
Yeah.
Well, on that note,
so obsessed.
Huge thank you to the Apostate Paul for screening for us today, all of our moderators, to Josie for agreeing to come on the hang up, to Aron for being the wonderful love of my life, but also the producer of this. And let me just say, there's a lot of other shows on the network. You should definitely be tuning in. Sunday, Jimmy will be on with we're not sure who yet, because I'm going to be busy. Tomorrow's a Transatlantic call-in show with Katy and Dr. Ben, starting at 2 p.m. Central. Monday's going to be Skeptalk with John Gleason. Next Wednesday, I'll be back with Kane B. There will be no Dying Out Loud on Tuesday. The notice that was posted up on the community page is this. I'm sure we'll be mentioning it on shows, but I'm letting y'all know that Dying Out Loud with Dave Warnock has sadly come to an end. Dave wants to spend what time he has left outside of the public's eye. A desire I can certainly understand. And we here at The Line wish him the absolute best. For now, we'll post clips or potentially bring back some of our off-day shows until we find the right program to fill the Tuesday slot. For my friend, Dave, I miss you. I can't wait till I get a chance to see you again. I hope you're doing well, and I support your decision. And I really appreciate all the things you've done for this cause that is so near and dear to you and to many others as well. Death and dying issues have been co-opted by religions, and dealing with it from a secular perspective with the forthrightness and honesty that you have is beyond commendable. I love you. I'll talk to you soon. For the rest of you, first of all, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for calling. Thanks for your super chats. Go out and do more if you can. But if you can't, at least do better, because better counts as more under almost any circumstances worth caring about. In the meantime, take care of yourself and each other. Welcome to 2024. There's going to be a bumpy ride. I got a freeze warning to go take care of. But in the meantime, take care of each other. Tune in. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Look at this list of people. Who do they think they are, these patron producers like Steve?
Oh my gosh. Such a nerd.
Well, what would we be without all these people? Look, there's a Mark.
I know.
It's amazing.
They're so amazing. I love them all. Why aren't all of you on this list? Come on.
You got a Q&A line?
Be on this list.